GeekCastRadio.com presents the Geek Cast Radio Top 100 Animated Series of All Time. Steve Megatron Phillips, Mike GFG1 Blanchard, Kevin Optimus Solo Thompson.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is finally time for the moment you've all been waiting for, the top 20 revealed here of our top 100 animated series of all time list. And in true GCRN fashion, we're coming full circle by bringing back our guest from the first episode of this countdown. Welcome back, Dirt.
Yay, I get to be on the important one.
You know, it's just because you mentioned in the other episode that, man, you wish you would have been on this one, so we felt like we had to.
Plus that, and plus he's like, at the end of one of the clips in episode 21, he's like, I will never be invited back.
We invited you back.
You just had to prove me wrong, huh?
Yes. Exactly.
Well, that and Pixel Dan was out buying a house.
I'll never get $1,000 for being on this show.
You're right. Hell, we don't even get $1,000 for hosting the show.
One day,
yeah,
20 years from now.
It's funny because Pixel Dan bought this new house, and it's actually like 3 blocks south of where I live. And it's kind of scary because I was like, oh, well, I could just carpool with you, and then I could walk back home to my house. And he's just kind of giving me this look like, oh, what did I do?
But anyway, so we're getting into the top 20, and just before we get to our first reveal, I just want to kind of go around the table, so to speak, as far as our ideas of the countdown so far and kind of what we're looking for or expecting or what our thoughts are going into this episode. So let's start with Mike. Any thoughts before we hit this top 20 or any just anything that was said to you over the course of the week since the last record or anything?
I hate that you put me first, you asshat.
Of course I would.
No. Disclaimer here. Kevin and I've said this before, so I'm repeating myself, but Kevin and I spent 6 hours, and I only relooked at my personal list once. So, yeah, apparently I'm going to have a lot of explaining to do, and I'm in fear for my life right now.
That's an excellent... So you were first, but you came up with an excellent response.
Fucker.
Steve, any thoughts before we get into it?
I think I'm going to be close on a few, and I'm going to be off on a few, but overall, I think it's going to be pretty well known, at least for 10 of them.
Yeah, I don't know what message board or forum or whatever I said this on, but one of the things I was kind of thinking about, up to this point, some people have been critical about us because we haven't had a lot of detailed information about some of the shows, which is intentional and for 2 reasons. Number one, Tooncast is where we go into detail with individual cartoon shows where we talk, anywhere from an hour to 2 hours on each show. So that's where you go for our detailed talk. But also, it's impossible for anybody besides myself to come in here prepared because they literally are finding out what the show is as we're recording it. So unless they can, in 2 seconds do research on the show, that's why we're not getting a lot of detailed information. It's everybody kind of talking off the top of their head. That being said, now that we're down to the top 20, some of them should not come as a surprise, so hopefully a few of us at least have some arguments or some ways to back up our opinions on some of these shows, because some of them we should be expecting to see. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Dirt, any thoughts about what you've been hearing since your last guest host and what you expect or what you're...
Yeah, well, the one thing I want to know is why do you hate Thundercats?
No, let me correct that. I do not hate Thundercats.
I don't know. I heard hate. I heard hate in your voice.
I own every volume of Thundercats on the DVDs, and that's one of my favorite cartoons, but for me, if I was making a list of my favorite cartoons, yes, it would have probably been exactly where we ranked it on our list. I just don't think it should be as far as best of all time because I think it's my personal bias is what likes it. And that's why I was trying to separate that from...
Does everybody hear this hate? Everybody hears this hate? This is pure hatred, evil.
But we are going to have a chance to go further into that in the future. But I don't want to give anything away.
Yes.
So any other thoughts besides my hatred of Thundercats?
Just step lightly this episode. That's all I'm saying. Just step lightly.
And with that, I think we're going to get into our first number 20 here.
20.
So we've been speculating for a while now throughout our journey of our first 80 as far as certain franchises and if we'd see more entries or not. And here's another example of one of the franchises that's most represented so far on our countdown, that being the Spider-Man franchise. So coming in at number 20 is Spider-Man, the animated series. It actually tied number 21, Family Guy, from last episode, but it won in a tiebreaker. IGN had it ranked at 84th. We have it all the way up at number 20, and so far the highest out of the Spider-Man cartoons. Mike, what are your thoughts?
At this point, no other Spider-Man cartoon better show up.
Did we have the overall order of the Spider-Man shows that did show up on our countdown right?
Yeah,
yes.
Most definitely. Because if the MTV version new animated series shows up at like beyond number 20, we really have to redo this entire project. And Spider-Man Unlimited, technically, even though it was a separate series, it's almost a continuation of this, even though it has slightly different voice actors in it. But it is the same. It follows the same storyline. But yeah, this is a perfect placement for this. I loved Spider-Man, the animated series, as a kid. I thought it was really great storytelling, great voice cast, and just really, really cool stuff.
As far as our ranking versus IGN, who got it right here?
See, I don't know, because right? Probably not, because it see, for me personally, I normally go by nostalgia on everything that I grew up with.
Notice that.
New age hater.
Shut up. Shut up. So I think if it realistically, it should probably be like 31, 32, somewhere around there. But
number 30?
No.
Just asking.
No. But, I mean, for our list and what our list has become, I'm okay with it being at 20.
We actually had 13 people vote for this one, and 7 of them had it in the 30s, so you might have something with that. Steve, you're only 2 off. You had it at number 18, so how do you feel about this one coming in at number 20?
Can't say I'm surprised, but obviously you can see which Spider-Man is the ultimate favorite among all of them. So
yeah, it seemed like it was a pretty good consensus.
I'm glad to see it land where it did.
Dirt, you didn't vote for this one.
Nope, sure didn't.
So, does it not deserve a spot in the top 100?
In the top 100, I could see the argument being made for it. Mm-hmm. The idea of, top 100 animated series of all time, I'm not so sure. I'm not so sold that it belongs in the the top 20. Again, this goes back into personal bias. Everybody has their own personal bias, and that's why we sit around and talk about them. And for me, it was a fine show, but I don't know that it was really anything spectacular. It's definitely better than Magic School Bus, but I don't know. If the consensus is that it belongs in the top 20, so be it. It belongs in the top 20.
Do you agree with Mike and Steve, though, as far as the order of the different Spider? Is this the best out of all the Spider-Man, or did you mention one earlier that you thought was better?
I enjoyed the when it went to Unlimited. That to me, when it kind of, because here it felt this particular series, to me, it just felt like it was kind of retreading the same ground as a lot of any other Spider-Man series. And when it went to Unlimited is when they were just kind of like, okay, everything you know is just completely different. We're doing our own thing. We're going our own way. We're doing another, planet and all this kind of crazy stuff. And I enjoyed that a little bit more because it was, kind of flexing its legs and going off on its own. And if you want to say that that's part of this and tie them together, then, okay, cool. Then I'll kind of go with that a little bit more than just that main series by itself.
Now, for me, just really quick, as far as the Spider-Man cartoons that have appeared on the countdown here, you've got the 60s, you've got Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, Spectacular Spider-Man, and this. Spectacular Spider-Man does have really, really great writing. Back in 1994, when this came out, it was kind of riding on the heels of X-Men, the animated series. It was like Marvel's big thing of them putting out animation, and they were putting out animation that was pretty much comic book story driven, so basically taking it off the page and putting it to animation. And that's one of the reasons why I like this series so much, is because it's not just a kids type of cartoon, it's a cartoon that anybody can watch. Does the Spider-Man the animated series have its flaws? Sure. But compare this to Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends and the 1960s Spider-Man, I think between those three, this one wins hands down for me.
I think the only other thing I wanted to bring up real quick before we end on this one is this is the fourth Spider-Man show, like you just mentioned, which by far so far is the most represented franchise in our countdown. The only other one that's even close is, have we had 2 Batmans, or have we only had 1?
We've only had 1.
So does Batman even have a chance of catching this with 4?
Well, we've had Batman, Brave and the Bold. The only other 2 really that I would want to see in like the top 20 is Batman Beyond and obviously Batman the Animated Series.
So your guess is that Spider-Man stays the most represented franchise in our countdown?
I would probably say so.
Okay.
Yeah, although,
probably.
Tom and Jerry was done as everything Tom and Jerry in the history of Tom and Jerry.
Yeah,
Whereas technically, you had Tom and Jerry and the Tom and Jerry Kids and the Tom and Jerry Hour and the Tom and Jerry Show and Tom and Jerry theatrical releases and, so technically that was like 17 different things.
Well, then there's been a couple of them like that actually too. I think the problem is when you start to split those up.
Tom and Jerry Kids is god-awful.
No, I know, but what I'm saying is
I love Tom and Jerry Kids, but anyway.
And split them up, what I've found so far is that people will ignore all of them except for their favorite, and they will just vote for that one. And then, or like, in some cases where we had a couple that where there's like 1 or 2 different versions, like Dragon Ball Z, for example. Well, that's a bad example, but how one person voted for Dragon Ball instead of Dragon Ball Z or whatever. And you start getting some that are left behind or some that don't finish as high, whereas people, I think, view more of the superhero ones individually. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying when you talk about like a Popeye
although you also did that with Super Friends.
Yeah.
Where you had
That's true.
Challenge of the Super Friends and the Super Friends and the Power Hour or whatever it was called. And you had all of those mixed together as one, too. So
that might be something we have to
we have to scrap this whole list and start.
We might have to talk about that if we do, in fact, decide to do an updated version at some point in the future. But let's see where we go to next.
19.
The shadows, dropping from the tide. Somewhere some villain schemes, but it numbers up 3, 2, 1. Darkwing Duck. When there's trouble, you call me Darkwing Duck.
Let's get dangerous.
So our second entry in the top 20 is another thing that we've kind of debated on throughout the course of our previous 4 episodes, and that was the whole Disney franchise and which ones we would see or which ones we wouldn't see. We had already seen Tailspin and Chippendales Rescue Rangers, and we had mentioned a couple that we thought we might see later on, and this is obviously one of them at number 19, Darkwing Duck. IGN had it ranked 93rd. We have it ranked all the way at the other end of the spectrum at 19. Steve, you're real close with this one at number 16, so is this another one where you're kind of happy where it came in?
Yeah, I'm actually pretty happy that this ended up here because, honestly, there's no way that this show should end up in the 90s. I mean, this show is so iconic. It touches on various superhero franchises, but it's got that lighthearted feel of Disney with some of the darkness of those superhero cartoons.
Yeah, and I don't know, like we were even talking about it compared to some of the other ones. I'm very happy myself that it ranked ahead of Tailspin and Rescue Rangers.
Oh yeah, this show is by far better than those.
Yeah, it is.
Mike, what other thoughts about Darkwing?
Darkwing had such great, again, another cartoon with such great storytelling for what the cartoon is. I mean, yeah, I know it's just a Disney cartoon, but the stories, I mean, it wasn't, Darkwing wasn't the average Disney cartoon where you've got, say Donald Duck and Huey, Dewey, and Louie or Scrooge or whoever going out and doing whatever. You had Darkwing actually attempt to be a superhero. And it was really, really cool. And everybody remembers that very first two-parter, crap.
Except for you.
The Terror Flaps in the Night, the one with Taras Bulba. Because what I remember about that is I remember actually seeing a VHS movie version of that.
Yeah, I don't remember that one in particular.
It was just great.
He wasn't on very long. There was 7 people that put it in their top 20. We had 2 people that had it in their top 10. Dirt, this is another one that you did not vote for. Any reasoning why you didn't vote for this one?
I mean, I love the show personally. I watched it, every day, whatever, coming home from school. But for me, it was just one of those things that, again, it wasn't on very long. So I didn't feel like it really had as much of an impact as some of those other Disney afternoon shows. Definitely better than Tailspin and Rescue Rangers. I would totally agree with that. So,
right.
I'm totally fine with where it's at.
Excellent. Well, so far we've touched on our superhero discussion from before. We've touched on our Disney discussion, and which we're going to have actually another discussion that we debated hotly at the end of episode 23, coming in at number 18. So let's see what that is.
18.
So obviously the debate that I was talking about was our debate on more of the adult primetime shows, and Futurama at number 18 is obviously another one of those examples. IGN had it in their top 10. We have it in our top 20. Again, 12 people voted for it. It's been on since 1999 with a little hiatus in there. Lots of awards as far as Emmys and Annies. But for the third time in a row, a show that Dirt did not vote for.
This is like why do we even have him here? He's not voting on any of the shows that are making the countdown.
Explain yourself.
Well, Futurama, when I put my list together, this is one thing I kind of talked about when I was on last time, was this idea that I had a hard time ranking shows and putting them on the list and kind of figuring out, well, is this one more important than that one, or is that one more important than this one? And when I look at Futurama is, the Joni Loves Chachi of The Simpsons. And so I kind of look at it in that sense of like, well, if The Simpsons is already on the list I'm representing, it blows away Futurama. Does Futurama really need to be on the list?
Yeah.
And so that was just one of those things where I didn't really put it on the list because to me it's just an extension of The Simpsons, and I had a hard time ranking it compared to other shows that I felt stood well on their own.
And that's exactly what I did with Pinky and the Brain, and why I left that off of my list, was because, in the same reason, I felt that it was just an extension of Animaniacs. So I didn't feel like I should vote for both of them. So I kind of get what you're saying with that one. Steve, how do you feel as far as Futurama and where it ranks against some of the other adult primetime shows we've either seen or we haven't seen?
Well, if any of them deserves to be this high up, I would say it'd be Futurama. Just because I greatly like this show much more than any of the rest of them. I don't know if it's because of its sci-fi nature and the fact that it pokes fun at just about everything, but to me it's slightly more intelligent and kind of off the wall, though, than The Simpsons, so it kind of piques my interest because you never know what they're going to hit up.
Mm-hmm. Well, and 4 people put it in their top 5. So there's a lot of love amongst, our geek friends and the geek crowd that we're involved with as far as Futurama. And I think it is a little bit of that sci-fi and a little bit of that more, not necessarily edgier, but that type of content. Now, Mike, you had it down closer to 40 instead of in the top 20, so...
One of the reasons why I had it at 40 was because, one of the reasons is I only caught episodes here and there, and I liked what I saw. I found it extremely funny. I don't see this as, an extension of The Simpsons. If anything's an extension of The Simpsons, even though it's a poor extension of The Simpsons, that's Family Guy.
I'll edit that out.
No, you better not. No.
But that's not an offshoot. That's just a blatant ripoff.
Exactly. There we go. Haha. 2 against 1. Neener. No, but all right.
Did you just say neener?
Yes, I did.
Wow,
Shut up.
5.
Futurama. Futurama is one of those things where it is genuinely funny. It genuinely has different episodes. It's not the same characters doing the same thing every single time. And I mean, you can't get anything better than a one-eyed, purple-haired Peggy Bundy, for Christ's sake.
Well, I would argue that, but just the fact I don't know all the ifs, ands, and the inside scoop as far as what happened as far as it got canceled at some point, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And then
they brought it back. The fans are actually what brought it back, I believe.
That's what I'm saying. So that in itself should say something that it came back. I know, Maurice LaMarche is always talking about Futurama on his Twitter.
Yep.
Obviously because he's heavily involved with it, but he loves the writing, and I think the writing is good. It's never been like my favorite show or anything, but I respect how long it's been on, and the critical acclaim it gets, and that it does have a pretty big fandom out there. I don't know. I don't have a problem with it being in our top 20. I wouldn't put it in my own personal favorites, but I have no problem with it being there.
17.
We haven't had a lot of our individual contributors' number ones come up yet in the list. I think we've had one maybe last episode. I think Tara's number one showed up. This is another of our contributors' number one pick, and that was Christopher Stapleton from Chicken Pot Pod. He had Justice League at his ultimate number one of all time. We have it at number 17, obviously, which is just a few higher than IGN had it at 20. Dirt, you voted for this one.
I did. I'll admit to this one. I'll admit to this one. This was one of those shows that right around the time before it came out, the only stuff I was watching that was animated was the Harvey Birdman and the Adult Swim Space Ghost and all of that type of stuff. And so this was one of those that it came on and I said, yeah, they're doing another superheroes, Superman, Batman, whatever. I've seen it. I've been there, done that. They've done it a million times. Why do I care?
Mm-hmm.
But after the show was on for, 3 or 4 weeks, somebody who had been recording the show burned them onto a DVD and gave them to me. And they said, you really need to check this out. So I sat down and I watched the first 4 episodes and I was hooked. I was like, this is fantastic. This is a great show. I love the way that they treated it very real. As real as you can do with people who can fly and shoot energy beams out of their fingers. It was very, very, I want to say mature. And I mean mature in the sense not like, oh, there's boobies and swearing, but it was mature in the sense that they treated things like it was important. On a lot of shows they'll have there's a giant comet coming to crash into the planet, so we have to go out there and stop it. You really felt like people's lives were in danger when certain things were happening, and people were going through, tough times in their lives and making decisions about what it means to be a hero, and if being a hero is really going to be their career, and the different personalities trying to interact, and a guy like Green Arrow coming in and being like, oh, well, you're going to do everything this way, and they're like, no, that's stupid. We're going to do it this way, and people butting heads, and for me it just really felt like, wow, this is the type of thing I like, where you can be mature and adult and have a show for quote-unquote grown-ups, but it also works on the kid level because you're not making it for grown-ups by, throwing in a random swear word or having somebody eviscerated on screen. It's for grown-ups because it's smart and it's intelligent. And, it also works for kids because it's wholesome and it's real.
Steve, we finally got one that Dirt voted for, and if my information is correct, you did not vote for Justice League. Is that correct, or did I have a typo?
I'm looking into it, but I do think that this show does deserve to be on the list. I do think that it deserves to be much higher, obviously, than the Super Friends, because this is basically a offshoot of that. I mean, it's not the same continuity whatsoever, but I mean, it's a nice update to that particular saga. So I mean, it is nice to see that show up somewhere, within the top 100. And I don't have it on my list, which again, it's probably just one I overlooked because I was voting for other shows I hoped made it. Mm-hmm. But after listening to Mike's podcast, The Secret Origins, I've had an increased interest in this show, and I've actually gone back to watch them on YouTube.
Gotcha. Mike, you had it at 21. IGN had it at 20. We have it at 17. Who's more right?
But no, Justice League is one of the greatest superhero cartoon shows ever. They got a lot of the any DC character that you wanted to see in animation, they tried to get it to you. We kind of mentioned Super Friends a second ago. They actually did the opposite. They said, we don't want to just bring in the Legion of Doom. And they didn't until the very last season. And it was just great storytelling, great voice cast. I mean, Kevin Conroy is Batman. I know we'll talk about him probably later. But Kevin Conroy is Batman. Michael Rosenbaum is the Flash. Phil Lamar is Green Lantern. Just a great voice cast. You got, in a few episodes, you got Mark Hamill as the Joker. Just overall really, really great. And, I mean, I can't say enough good things about the show. I mean, hell, I did my own podcast about the entire all 91 episodes. So, I mean, if somebody can do a 25-episode podcast on 91 cartoon episodes, they like it.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, well, okay. I would also say that one of the things that really blew me away with it was that it had this huge cast of characters. I mean, they reached pretty deep into the DC universe and pulled out characters that you never thought you were going to see.
Tom Turbine.
Well, and not only that, but they made them right. Yep. The biggest problem a lot of times, and this is one of those things, I've got a lot of trepidation for the Green Lantern movie that's coming out this summer, because there are a lot of things you watch in the trailers and you're like, that I know that's wrong, I'm just going to try to go with the flow, and whatever. And obviously whenever you take characters that have been around 50, 60, 70 years in some cases, you have to make changes, you have to update them, you have to contemporize them in order to make them fit in the story you're trying to tell. But for Justice League Unlimited, it felt a lot of times like they were just taking them off the page and putting them into their story. And you felt like they had a history, and maybe they've had the other interactions in the past in the comics that you didn't see on the show, but you felt like they still had those interactions and those histories, and it just felt right. And that's one of the things that I really enjoyed about the show.
And, there's, in the first two seasons when they were doing those two-part epic story type formats, that worked for that format. And then when they expanded the League in Unlimited, they went to the 30-minute single story type of deal, with the exception of the once and feature thing two-parter. But just amazing writing, amazing voice acting, amazing animation. There are a couple episodes here and there that aren't that great. But overall, great show, and at number 17, it probably deserves it.
So far, out of 4 reveals in this episode, we've had 2 superhero shows. Let's see if we get any others.
16.
So I think this next entry actually justifies some of our discussion in episode 20 where we talked about some of the biases we had, and one of those we mentioned was a superhero bias, because we have yet another superhero show coming in next here at number 16, and that is obviously Batman Beyond. So we've had another Batman entry. I want to start with actually Mike again, because you had it closest out of the ones that are here on the record. You had it at 13, we have it at 16, so what are your thoughts about Batman Beyond?
Great show. This was a original, unique idea. Back then, I believe it was Bruce Timm that approached, I think it was Jamie Kennedy, who was Jamie somebody who was the head at WB at the time, the WB TV station, and said that they want, would you guys do a teenage Batman show? And all the DCIU creators were like, oh, how could we do this? And Batman Beyond is essentially an extension of Batman the Animated Series, because it continues with Bruce Wayne being old, and then you bring in Terry McGinnis, and it eventually becomes Terry's story. The music in this was amazing, and it gave us one of the best animated features of all time, Batman Beyond Return of the Joker.
The people that voted on this one ranged from putting it at number 3 to 58, and obviously 7 people didn't vote for it. Steve, you were the one that had it the highest at number 3, so are you upset that this is at 16?
No, but I'm at least glad that it made it under the top 20. Mm-hmm. Just because the show is so freaking awesome. I mean, you got Kevin Conroy continuing, you got the continuation of Batman the Animated Series, and it even ties in with Superman and Justice League Unlimited. So I mean, just about everything gets dragged into it, and it's nice to see somewhat of a conclusion, and then tying up some of the old villains' time on the universe, like Mr. Freeze, the Joker, Raish. I mean, it's just it's a nice touch.
It also did get a lot of critical acclaim with some Annie wins and some Daytime Emmy wins. I do think the one thing that I like most about this series, and I'm obviously not a huge superhero fan, but I like the unique concept of, not necessarily completely unique, but as far as what Batman had done before, as far as changing the time frame of what we're talking about. We did have it a lot higher than IGN, who had it at 40. But again, we have yet to have an entry on our list where all 4 of us have voted on it, because Dirt, you're left out again.
Well, and this goes back to what I just said about Futurama. This was an extension of Batman the Animated Series, and so in my mind, it's kind of part of that. With Batman the Animated Series, which I guarantee you will be higher up on the list, I felt with that being represented, it didn't need its own spot.
Which is a legitimate thing. I think when you only have so many spots to give shows recognition, sometimes you have to cut corners, not necessarily cut corners, but, take ways where you can combine one into another and save another spot for another show. So I have no problem with you doing that.
This is another one where I'm going to disagree with Dirt, because, as I said a second ago, Batman Beyond, yes, it does continue Bruce Wayne's story, but it brings in Terry McGinnis, and it's his story. It's a new Batman. It's not, the only time we ever get Bruce Wayne, the old Bruce Wayne, in the Batsuit is at the very beginning of the very first episode. The rest of the show is about Terry and him dealing with all of his stuff. So I think it does deserve a separate entry. Yeah,
well, I would never take like Batman the Animated Series and then say that this was, like the final 3 seasons.
Right.
I'm not looking at it that way.
Right.
But it's just, for me, it's just that idea that there was a natural continuation from that series into this series.
Right, yeah.
So, it just kind of felt for me that if Batman the Animated Series is on there, this just kind of goes along with that.
15.
And the masters of the universe. I am Adam, Prince of Eternia and defender of the secrets of Castle Grayskull. This is Cringer, my fearless friend. Fabulous secret powers were revealed to me the day I held aloft my magic sword and said, "By the power of Grayskull!"
So we finally come to one where all four of us have voted for it, and some people might be surprised because we're five shows into this episode and we haven't gone to the 80s yet. But we'll fix that here at number 15 with our first 80s entry, the original He-Man and the Masters of the Universe from 1983. IGN had this way lower at 58. We have it in the top 20 at number 15. Scotty had this ranked as his number 1. Pixel Dan had it at 5, JT 6, Phil from Blogomatic 5, Mike, you had it at 10, and I had it at 14, so we did have a lot of people that had it pretty high on our list.
I'm surprised Dan didn't have it number 1.
Yeah, and I want to go first on this one because I know we're going to get blasted on this one, and I know a lot of people don't think this deserves to be this high. A couple of reasons why I think it does deserve to be in the top 20. Now, I'm not saying necessarily where in the top 20, but I think it does deserve to be in the top 20 was because of the actual impact that this show had on animation in general. And what I mean is this is basically the first 80s toy commercial, if you want to call it, or action shows that really broke the mold as far as number one, being able to be on the air when you are a direct line of toys. And second, breaking the boundaries as far as, if I'm remembering right, when we covered this at Tooncast, as far as the syndication.
Yeah, you're remembering it right.
Yeah, as far as being the one that broke the mold as far as going into syndication and showing that as a viable option for cartoons. And this one really was the trailblazer for the other 80s action series that would come later. So I think for that, it deserves to be in there. Now, is this something that I can sit down and watch like 5 hours of at one sitting? Absolutely not. I can watch it in very small doses. But I don't know, I think the characters are memorable, and I know I'm an 80s kid, so I have some bias here, but I just think as far as the impact it had, it deserves to be in the top 20, and some people may disagree with me or may not. Let's start with Steve, because you had it down at 61, which is real close to 58, where IGN had it. Is this way too high for He-Man, in your opinion?
I think it's a little high for He-Man. I don't think it should be necessarily in the top 20, but I think it should have been between 40 and 20 somewhere.
Okay.
Being that it was a good show for its time and that it has had a successful reboot of it, but I don't think that it really holds up as well today.
No, I agree with you 100% that it doesn't hold up very well today. But and the other thing I forgot to mention, not only as far as just 80s action shows, but for Filmation, I mean, this is their crown jewel, basically. So I think that kind of plays into a part. But no, I agree with you 100%, Steve. This does not hold up today at all.
It does if you have enough whiskey. I had this. I had this on my list at 22. If it comes in at 15, I'm fine with that being in the top 20 because I do feel like this is a show that had a massive cultural impact.
Yeah.
And it may have been the culture of the 8 to 14-year-olds, but that's still a significant grasp of the imagination that stuck with enough people that it took a couple tries of rebooting it to find out what the magic was for, now they have this successful toy line that basically launched the Mattel Matty Collector, the whole website and their whole subscription service and that whole idea of these beautifully sculpted high-dollar action figures. It's a tie-in for a toy line, sure, and it's basically a 30-minute commercial with a bunch of swords and buff dudes. But it did have this huge impact. The impact of He-Man and the Masters of the Universe would not be the same if it was just the toy line. It would not have been the same if it was the Dolph Lundgren movie. There was something about this show that kind of fired up that whole zeitgeist of He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, and it may have been a Conan clone, and it may have had these weird undertones of guys walking around showing off their nipples to everybody and whatever, but
an updated Thundar the Barbarian.
Yeah, you just can't. You can't escape that show. You couldn't escape that show then. And today, I have a son who is 6. He knows who He-Man is.
Yeah, and not only did it, you said the toys that and even the current toy line, Steve mentioned the reboot, the 2002 reboot of it, and you mentioned also the cult favorite as far as geeks everywhere, or a lot of places, as far as that live action movie that came out back in the 80s was, I don't know, I love that movie. That's a whole nother story. But
again, back to the whiskey.
But I think one of the things with He-Man for me is it is one of the first cartoons that came along that had more than just one or two memorable lead characters. Yeah. Because up until that point, it was usually the idea where you just had this like one major character, and like the one I just said that it kind of imitated in a way, Thundar the Barbarian, you just had Thundar. And a lot of the shows before that, when it was action, you just had that one or two main people. This one, all of a sudden, and I know it was because they wanted to sell more toys, but regardless of that fact, it doesn't take away the fact that all of a sudden they were introducing you to dozens of characters that were both memorable, that you could like, that everybody could have a different favorite. Before, if you didn't like the main star of a show, you probably didn't like that show. This one, you could not necessarily love He-Man, but maybe you love Ram Man, or maybe you love Man-at-Arms, or, some of the bad characters. And there was multiple options for you to attach yourself to this show, and obviously it's a formula that many shows would follow after that. Mike, you want to say some more stuff about He-Man?
Yeah. He-Man is just great. First of all, not just the cartoon itself. I mean, the cartoon, I know the toy line happened and then the cartoon happened, but with the cartoon happening, all this other merchandise happened. Like, I specifically remember my best friend had a Masters of the Universe record. The cartoon itself, yes, it is dated nowadays, and yes, you probably shouldn't watch more than maybe one or two episodes unless you're, drinking heavily.
Cheers.
Where everybody knows your name, yeah. But it's one of those things where these, and Kevin has pointed this out before, I am a big continuity buff. This is one of the shows that I grew up with that I like it for its individual stories, because each of them were an individual story. I think what really wears on me when I was watching this for our Tooncast episode 10 was that the morals at the end of every episode. Those got really old really fast. The episodes themselves didn't get old, but it's like, oh God, skip that. Skip that moral stuff.
We don't need that nonsense.
But, yeah. Like you guys said, I mean, we wouldn't have Masters of the Universe Classics right now if there wasn't this original cartoon.
Well, and we wouldn't have a lot of the other 80s action shows that we've already talked about, or maybe that we'll still talk about. A lot of them wouldn't have came along. It had not this broken the mold as far as the toys part, as far as the syndication, as far as a lot of different things that hadn't been done up to that point that He-Man did and did successfully. And it's like I said earlier on, to me, I know it doesn't hold up, but I go back to the argument that it was super popular for an entire generation. I know it was only on literally for 2 seasons, but as far as the reruns that would show every year from then, I mean, this captivated a generation, and if it was successful enough to do that, it deserves at least some credit here with us.
Well, and also, you say, it was only on for 2 years. I remember watching it a lot longer than 2 years.
No, 2 seasons as far as like...
I know, that's what I mean, though. It's they did that whole syndication model.
Right.
It used to be a show had to be on for 4 years before it could go into syndication. They went straight into syndication, and people said, well, we bought these episodes, we're going to keep playing them. I remember watching the show for 5 years. It was crazy to me when I was, older, and at some point I looked back like, oh, I should get a hold of those. What do you mean there was only 2 years of this show? Like, I watched this show a lot longer than that. Well, yeah, because that's how syndication works. They just randomly mix them up and they play them over and over again.
Yeah, I gotta say that I'm very happy with where the 2002 Mike Young Productions version came in, and I'm very happy where this one's coming in. And thank God that pitiful excuse for New Adventures did not make the list. Oh my God. No. Listen, when Dirt, like Dirt was saying, years after this show was over, it was still in syndication. I remember one morning that they showed an episode of Masters of the Universe, and then they showed this new thing, and I'm like, oh, it's continuing. oh wait, what is this? And as an 8-year-old kid, I looked at the intro for like 10 seconds, saw Skeletor's face, and turned the TV off, and I said, I'd rather watch The Simpsons.
I'm pretty sure if I did ever see a preview for this as a kid, it did not register with me that it was a He-Man cartoon.
It was a bad memory.
I actually agree with you, though, as far as I love that the Mike Young production came in and right around, I think it was like number 50, 51, somewhere in there.
Yep.
And I love where this one came in. Now, which show would I rather watch right now? The Mike Young one, of course. And if I could get more episodes of one of the series, I would like more of that one. But I still think we're right in putting this one higher. And,
oh yeah,
I know people
because
will disagree,
as Dirt said, because of the cultural impact it had.
Yeah, and I don't think a lot of people again like to ignore the success things had at the time, and I think that's wrong. So our first 80s show, I don't know how many more we'll have. Actually, I do, but nobody else does. But
well, it definitely deserves to be higher than Alvin and the Chipmunks.
14.
Scooby-Dooby-Doo, where are you? We got some work to do now. Scooby-Dooby-Doo, where are you? We need some help from you now.
So we did better than IGN on this one, but I am still very disappointed because to me, no-brainer, top 10, and we have it not making the top 10, and that is Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? Now, I know this might bring up the whole conversation as far as, yes, there was like 1,001 different versions of this show from 1969, and it's still going, obviously, today with Mystery Inc., and we've had all the different movies, and there's been a lot of different versions of this same character, but this is the one that started it all. This was one of the best of them. From 1969, so an old school entry, I think it's automatic top 10. I had it at number 2. One of my BTVA guys had it at his number 1. Dirt, you had it at number 4. Are you with me here that this should be higher?
Oh, this should definitely be higher. Shame, shame, shame.
I agree.
This is another one of those ones that does not hold up whatsoever.
I actually disagree with you on that. I know a lot of people might say that, but I can actually still watch this show. Just taking the last entry of He-Man, I can watch this show way easier than I can watch He-Man now. I can watch any version of Scooby-Doo almost, except for there was a few bad ones. But my problem here is, and I don't mean to say anything negative towards Steve, but 6 people did not find a spot for Scooby-Doo anywhere in their top 100. I know not everybody voted for all 100. Some people voted for 50 or for 75 or for however. But how do 6 people leave this off of their list entirely?
They were high.
Steve, answer my question.
Okay. Well, this is the thing for me.
Okay.
I knew about it. I figured it would end up where it's at, like just somewhere towards the top 10.
Mm-hmm.
I've never personally cared for the show. It's more so like I watch it as a hit or miss thing, but I've never really gotten into it. And it's nothing against the show. It's just, I don't know, it's just something about it never really clicked with me.
Yeah.
I mean, granted, it is a good show, and it does deserve to be higher. I will admit that. And granted, some of it doesn't hold up, but the fact that a lot of the voicing stayed the same, a lot of the concepts has stayed the same over the decades, and it's such a remarkable franchise that it just keeps going year after year with maybe a year or 2 break in between them, but they keep continuing with new content that this franchise, there's no way that it should be higher than the top 10.
Well, and like you're saying, as far as look at how many different franchises or cartoon characters or different series that this has outlasted. First of all, I mean, and it's not like it's bad. As far as reinventing itself, I mean, the Mystery Inc. show that's on right now is an excellent show, and actually, it got quite a few votes as far as towards. I mean, it didn't make our list or anything, but a lot of people voted for Mystery Inc. too, and just for its ability to continue to reinvent itself to new generations and new generations. I mean, I have a 10-year-old niece that loved Scooby-Doo as a kid, and, I'm way older than she is, and it's not only the amount of reincarnations or new versions that have survived and made this last from 1969 to now 2011, but it's also, look at the number of shows that have tried to imitate it.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish I had a list in front of me, but I mean, there are dozens of shows that tried this whole, we're going to solve a mystery, we're going to have a group of animals or a group of kids or a group of, these 4 or 5 different things that are going to try to solve this mystery. I mean, we've seen it over and over again, especially back in the, 60s, 70s, or 80s, in that time period, we saw a lot of this. So I think not only the fact that it's lasted so long, but, the whole imitation is the highest form of flattery nonsense. I think that also gives it some credit. Now, Mike, you had it at 62. So how do you feel about it coming in at 14?
I'm okay with it coming in at 14. I personally ranked it at 62 because of the fact, I won't ever say anything bad about this voice cast. This voice cast was awesome. But just this is a show where I'm actually the opposite of Kevin. I can watch more 1983 He-Man episodes than I can watch Scooby-Doo episodes. Or I can watch a lot of Scooby-Doo is the 4 or 5 or 6 different the Scooby-Doo movies they did, like the team-ups with Batman and Robin and the Harlem Globetrotters. The 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo, I love that series. But, I do recognize it for its effect on cult, in pop culture and just the way that it is. But just looking back at it, for me, it just doesn't hold up. Even nostalgia-wise, it doesn't really hold up for me anymore.
There's something wrong with your head. I don't know. To me, this is just a franchise that shouts top 10 to me. I don't know. Maybe.
I would also argue that this original series here, this is also one of those things where my mom was familiar with it, my aunt was familiar with it, I'm familiar with it, my sister's familiar with it, my son is familiar with it, my wife is familiar with it. It's another one of those cultural impact things. I can see in 25 years, not as many people are going to be familiar with He-Man from 1983 as they will be with Scooby-Doo, Where Are You from 1969.
I agree.
13.
1,000 years ago, superstition and the sword ruled. It was a time of darkness. It was a world of fear. It was the age of gargoyles. Stone by day, warriors by night. We were betrayed by the humans we had sworn to protect, frozen in stone by a magic spell for 1,000 years. Now here in Manhattan, the spell is broken, and we live again.
So we had a little quick stop at the 80s and then 69, and now we're right back into the 90s where we've been with most of the entries for this episode so far, and another Disney series coming in on the countdown. Again, we had this way higher than IGN, who had it at 45. Gargoyles at number 13. Steve, I'm going to start by putting you on the spot because you had this in your top 10, so you must be happy that it at least made number 13.
Yes, I am glad that it got up that high. It at least deserves to be around top 10, which it did accomplish. This show was one of the darkest series Disney has ever had and ever will have, considering that they disowned it. But the animation in this show took Darkwing to the next level. And this show has such superb writing, awesome voice cast. I mean, hell, they have a lot of people from Star Trek The Next Generation.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it's just the whole show overall. I mean, if you didn't like this show, you're freaking nuts.
And 8 people on our voting contributors list here put it in their top 20, so you're not alone as far as your enjoyment of this show. Mike, is it too high for Gargoyles?
Not really, because, I agree with everything what Steve said, but specifically to voice cast, I think this is although I didn't know the guy's name at the time, obviously, but this is like the very first time I heard Keith David's voice, who he voiced Goliath in this. He has one of those very, very commanding voices, and just in general. I mean, I see this guy in movies, and he still has that. He's one of those voice actors that doesn't need to do an imitation or change his voice or lower his voice. He just has that, when he talks, he commands a room. And for the lead character Goliath here, it was just amazing. The animation was great. The storytelling was great. It's a shame that Disney, pretty much disowns this and denounces it. This does deserve top 20.
I'm really not super familiar with this cartoon, so I'm not going to say too much with it. I kind of understood its importance, and the amount of people that love this show is undeniable, and that's just obvious through any message boards, forums, or anything. If you're talking to anybody about animation, it seems to come up. So I didn't have it as high as you guys because I don't know it as much, so I had it at number 74. But let's go to Dirt, since he, again, did not vote for this one.
Never saw it.
Okay, you're with me.
Just never. This was the time period after I graduated high school and I was doing college and Southern Comfort. So, just never saw the show.
Okay, well that's a legitimate reason then.
And hey, and if it's this high on the list, then you know what? Maybe I should be familiar with it.
Yeah, I've actually, this is one of the shows that I've actually wanted to sit down and watch. I just literally have not had the opportunity to do that yet, and I need to make some time for it. So we'll take Steve and Mike's word for it that it deserves to be where it's at.
But only from those two guys. Everyone else who voted for it, we don't trust you.
Because you lie.
This is Cobra Commander, and I am destroying G.I. Joe on number 12. Cobra!
Fight for freedom wherever there's trouble. G.I. Joe is there. G.I. Joe, American hero. G.I. Joe is there. It's G.I. Joe against Cobra and Destro, fighting to save the day. He never gives up. He's always there, fighting for freedom over land and air. G.I. Joe, American hero. G.I. Joe is there.
So only 5 people left this next one off their list, and it's our second 80s entry, and this one is G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero, coming in at number 12. So it is higher than He-Man. We might be able to talk about that a little bit. IGN had it at 19, we have it at 12, so we have it slightly higher. I had it at 17, Steve, you had it at 11, Christopher had it at number 4, Scotty at 6, Pixel Dan at 9, so I mean it got a lot of love. 14 people voted for this, which is a lot. I'm actually happy that it's in the top 20. I would not have quite put it this high, though, myself. Mike, what are your thoughts on the original G.I. Joe?
Okay, now I'm really scared.
You're going to get raked over the coals.
If Real American Hero comes in here, I'm actually hoping that number 11 is G1, because if G1 gets any higher, we, again, have to really rethink this entire project. Oh,
well, it's like I said before, we, in our bias, we grab from a lot of Transformers communities, so.
Right. G.I. Joe Real American Hero was, for me it was the little green army men come to life, honestly. Because everybody as a kid had those little plastic, stick green army people. Mm-hmm. We had tubs and tubs and tubs of them as kids. And this cartoon just, it along with Transformers, it was, two of the biggest 80s franchises from Sunbow. And it just had really, really good storytelling, I thought, back then.
Well, and the other thing with this one, though, is that it goes back so much further to when my brother, who's quite a bit older than me, used to have the big 12-inch action figures from back in the day. Like in the 60s or 70s or whenever those came out, I think 70s, somewhere in there. So the actual story of G.I. Joe was, predates this actual cartoon. But for me, I kind of have flip-flopped. When I was a kid, obviously I loved both this and Transformers, and I think you can't talk about one really hardly without talking about the other. As a kid, Transformers was my favorite out of the two. I think I've actually flip-flopped a little bit now. As far as just this individual series, I'm not talking about the franchise as a whole, but as far as this individual series versus G1, I think I actually like this series a little bit better now than the G1 Transformers. But like you said, these two shows defined a generation of boys as far as everything. I mean, this is what they were watching as they were growing up. This is where they were learning certain things from. This is what they were consumed with, and who doesn't know, like, you say G.I. Joe, everybody knows exactly what you're talking about. Yep. And it's because of this. And it's another one where there's been multiple incarnations. We've had live action movies, we've had other series, and obviously even this last year we got a new series, but I don't think you can deny the impact that both this and Transformers had on a generation.
No, you can't. And it's one of those things where, again, amazing voice acting. Just amazing voice acting.
Oh, this is one of the best voice casts
ever.
Well, I mean, I would put some of those, obviously some of those mashups, like when you had Laugh Olympics or whatnot, when you got everybody from back in the day on there. Mm-hmm. You had some John Stevenson and Dawes Butler and Mel Blanc and Don Messick all in one group or whatever, some of those types of shows.
Right.
But as far as like from our lifetime, I mean, this is just ridiculous voice cast. Now, Steve, you barely missed this one. You had it at 11 and it came in at 12. So is this a perfect placement for you? Is it too high now that you've seen the whole list, or how do you feel about it?
I definitely like where it landed.
You liked it? It's ahead of He-Man?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Fucker.
It's so much better than He-Man.
But again, one of the reasons why I kind of can't compare G.I. Joe to He-Man, whether one is better than the other, two completely different concepts. First of all, you've got He-Man with sword and sorcery. You got G.I. Joe, which is all military.
One thing I don't understand about you, Mike, is I'm sorry.
There we go.
That, so far we've revealed some of your top 10, which has been Thundercats was in your top 10, Inspector Gadget was in your top 10, Gem, Mask, and He-Man and She-Ra was like number 11. So those were all shows in your top 10, yet for G.I. Joe you ranked it 54th.
Yeah, so?
I don't understand you. Are you an 80s kid or are you not an 80s kid?
I am.
He's a hippie. He's an anti-military kid.
Shut up. No, I am, but, like you said that, as a kid you had a choice. And back then you chose Transformers.
I still loved them both.
Right, no, I know, and I didn't say that you didn't, but, you said back then you chose Transformers. Same thing with me. I had a choice. I caught episodes here and there of G.I. Joe, but it was like, if I had a choice between, like, say, G.I. Joe was on Fox, which it wasn't because Fox wasn't around yet, but I'm saying, say G.I. Joe was on one channel and Transformers was on another.
It wasn't.
Back then, I would be more apt to tune into Transformers rather than G.I. Joe.
Well, they weren't, just for the record. They were never on at the same time.
I know they weren't.
You never had to make that choice.
I'm just saying.
Okay.
Shut up. Can we move on yet?
No, because you're the only one person that had this ranked lower than you, except for the couple people that didn't have it on their list at all. Shame on you. Are we going to get, basically annihilated here for so far having He-Man and G.I. Joe in our top 20?
I don't know.
I think they're both shows that had huge cultural impacts, and that's an important thing to remember. They may not have had the best animation, and maybe some of the stories aren't the best stories to kind of go back and revisit. But again, it played into that whole era of, it wasn't just the show. It was the show, and the toys, and the backpacks, and the Trapper Keepers, and the Garbage Pail Kid parodies, and, everything else that tied into it. It was part of that whole thing. If you pull it out, just that one slice out and say, look only at the animated show, well then, yeah, it probably should fall farther down on the list. But when you take it as where it was in society and culture and the impact it was having and the way it was, shaping imagination and the way people ripped it off and stole ideas from it and the way that, I don't think 3 3/4 inch figures, they had them before, but they didn't take off till this G.I. Joe series.
It was basically G.I. Joe and Star Wars is what is the reason why those figures are still around, that size figure.
Right. I mean, Star Wars obviously came out first and kind of had that push, but with G.I. Joe, suddenly it was everybody's home. Everybody had them. And so I think you have to look at that whole big picture and you say, yeah, these things really had an impact on who we are.
Well, and I also think another thing, you kind of brought up the storytelling or the writing, and I think it's way too easy for some people to look at these 80s shows And what they do is they pick out a few or a handful of episodes that were really badly written or had, just terrible storytelling, and then they stereotype or label the whole show like that. For every bad G.I. Joe episode, there was a really good G.I. Joe episode. As far as what I feel.
It also went out there sometimes, like when they did the whole Serpentor saga and some of that stuff, or the town of Springfield. When everybody in town was just Play-Doh that came to life, so that Cobra Commander could try to figure out secret passwords. I mean, it really just kind of went outside the box of what you expected. You always expected Cobra to roll up on the Statue of Liberty and try to blow it up and ransom it for $1,000 or whatever. Because $1,000 was a lot of money when you're 5. But But they really went out there and did some fantastic and amazing stuff that you go back and you look at it, and it may seem kind of silly as an adult to go back and be like, oh, a talking clay, whatever. But when you're a kid and suddenly the faces start melting and the goo starts swirling around the drain, you're like, what the hell am I watching? This is fantastic.
Well, yeah, and I guess my point is that just too many times people write off some of these 80s shows as just having bad writing in overall, and I think that's unfair to a few of the people that did some really good writing on some of these shows. So, don't take the whole series based on 1 or 2 episodes you see. But, I don't know, we've had 2 80s shows, and I think Mike might be scared as to how many more we're going to have, but let's see what our last one not to quite make the top 10 is.
11.
So back a couple episodes, we had a discussion when we were talking about Spider-Man and Batman as far as who would have the most and all this other stuff, and I posed the question, is there any other superhero franchise that we would expect to see on our list? And we have finally found it at number 11, the last one not to quite make the top 10, which is X-Men from 1992. We had it 2 higher than IGN. 15 people voted for it. That's the most we've seen so far. Mike, let's start with you. You had it at 23. How do you feel about X-Men being at number 11?
I like it. This, again, and I'm sure there'll be people out there that said that the animators and the people that were creating the show back then got it wrong, but, I mean, this, again, like Spider-Man the Animated Series, was comic books come to life. They lifted stories directly from the X-Men comics, and just amazing. You want, multi-parters, you want full-on suspense-type stories. Yes, there was a few episodes and a few seasons where they had one-shots, but just overall great story writing, great voice acting. I mean, I swear the chick that voiced Rogue, she must not have a voice nowadays with how much screaming Rogue had done in this series. I don't know, I really, really enjoyed it.
Isn't this one, I don't know much about, obviously, all these, I've said that multiple times, but isn't this one of the longest-running comic book, what is this? This is Marvel, right?
Yeah.
Is this the longest-running Marvel animated series of all time?
I don't think so.
Okay. It's if not, it's one of them lasting 5 seasons.
Yeah.
Being on 92 through 97. I actually think I did read somewhere that it is the longest one because Spider-Man the Animated Series was only 65 episodes, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, it could be as far as... See, I thought you were asking as far as actual comic history, but as far as cartoon series history, it probably is Marvel's longest-running cartoon series.
Well, I think that says something in and of itself. Steve missed it by 2 again. You had it at 13, and this one came in at 11, so how do you feel about X-Men?
He missed it by that much.
Wow, was that Chief Quimby? Or Inspector Gadget?
Chief Quimby.
Wow, that just threw me off. Yes, I definitely like the show. I'm glad that it made it up here. This show is definitely iconic for what it did especially for the X-Men and for animation in general in the early 90s because pretty much DC... the other thing it had going for it was Batman the Animated Series, and Marvel was just kicking great shows right out of the park. I mean, you had X-Men, you had Spider-Man. I mean, so this show was one of their best ones. And everything about it, from the intro to the story to the voice acting and the art, I mean, everything drew you into the show.
Should we have had it in our top 10?
I think it should have been in the top 10, at least at like 10, but I still think it should have been like a 9 or a 10.
Yeah, so right around this spot is fine.
Yes.
How about you, Dirt? Another one you didn't vote for.
I didn't like the show.
Really? All right, why not?
I mean, I thought the stories were okay, but let's face it, the X-Men are just a second-hand Justice League. Hopefully we can get some flames on that one.
Well, true. I'll give that to you.
I like the storylines, yes, I recognize them as being lifted right out of the comic, but to me, the animation on this show was just ass. Like, the first time it started up and you heard that cheesy guitar rock that sounded like somebody's garage band got paid $50 and a pizza in order to play it. And it's just the character designs and the shadowing and just the way the people moved, it just looked like the cheapest Korean animators that they could get. Just the whole show, I was like, yay, they're finally doing good stories. Why does it have to be like this?
Mike, response?
Steve? Me coming from a guy that had never really caught on to a lot of the comic stories, I thought that for its time, the animation was really good. I think this is the cartoon that kind of really pushed X-Men to almost porn type of statures when it came to Storm and Rogue. But, you know, just, I don't know. I always liked it. I can see Dirt's point of, you know, some of the episodes do kind of, the animation doesn't really look all that great, but overall, for its style, I liked it.
Steve, any comments on their discussion on that?
No, I agree. I like it, but I mean, and I will give you that it is pretty much like a second-rate Justice League. I mean, I do prefer Justice League over this, but still, for the time, it was a great show.
And I have a feeling some people out there are getting a little nervous that have their own personal favorites that they have not seen come up on our list yet, because the spots are disappearing, and we only have about 10 more shows to come in, so I don't know, hopefully you see your favorite, but I can just sense some nervousness out there. So let's see what our first show in the top 10 is.
10.
We're tiny, we're toony, we're all a little loony. And in this cartoony, we're invading your TV. We're comic dispensers, we crack up all the censors. On Tiny Toon Adventures, get a dose of comedy. So here's at the Acres, it's a whole wide world apart. Our home sweet home stands alone, a cartoon work of art.
So our first entry in the top 10, and some people may have been wondering why we hadn't heard from this specific company yet, because we haven't had a whole lot of the whole Warner Brothers showing up in our countdown. This one just cleaned up at the awards shows. IGN had this at 41. I disagree with that. I don't know if I'd put it in the top 10, but 41 is way too low. Tiny Toon Adventures was absolute genius. As far as of its time, this was one of the only shows in that first 5 years of the 90s that I actually genuinely didn't dislike, because it was kind of a time where I hated a lot of the cartoons that were coming out, and I actually loved Tiny Toons. 41 too low, 10 too high for me. Mike, how do you feel?
I'm okay with it being 10. I kind of wish it, you know, it definitely deserves top 20. I'm not sure if it deserves top 10, but the comedy in this was just amazing. All the gags, the animation, the fact that they actually brought in the Looney Tunes characters as teachers.
Well, it was an absolute genius idea.
Yeah.
To bring in these new characters, but then to have the old Looney Tunes teaching them. I mean, how perfect was that? I don't know. For me, that was like an absolute genius idea, and it was a perfect way to reinvent an old stable of characters and still do it. But go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, yeah, you're right. I mean, it's one of those things where, you know, some people who have really, really crappy shows like Ren and Stimpy say that, oh, it's a Looney Tunes ripoff. You know, they're wrong, but, you know.
Well, is that something bad? Is it bad to be trying to take something from the Looney Tunes?
Well, his direct quote, if I remember correctly, was said that this show is so horrible, it's just a direct ripoff of Looney Tunes, but a bad one at that. Which is kind of scary that I remember what that asshat had said. But, you know, Tiny Toons, first of all, this is the show that started the type of musical cartoon comedy.
Well, and we haven't had a lot of comedies so far in the top 20. We've had a lot of superheroes. We've had a couple 80s shows, and we had, like, Futurama. You know, I mean, we haven't had, like, just straight-up comedies besides, I mean, I guess Futurama's a comedy, but, you know, as far as comedy for kids, and this one obviously ran the spectrum as far as ages go, so it's kind of nice to have more of this comedic presence in our top 20, I think.
And again, voice acting. Tress MacNeille, just the voices that she did with Babs Bunny. Mm-hmm. You know, was just amazing. I still love the very first episode, A Looney Beginning, and how, you know, they showed the cartoon guy trying to create the characters and just the process through the actual Tiny Toon Adventures episode of how they go about creating ideas and stuff and scrapping ideas. I thought that was really, really well done.
It's another rare one where all four of us voted on it.
Yep.
And we all had it in the, you know, mid to upper 20s. Steve, you had it at 39, so let's go to you next. I feel, like I said, IGN 41 was too low for me, 10's too high. How do you weigh in on that argument?
I would say more so that I think that this, I don't know, I think it deserves possibly the top 10. Actually, more than likely, just because it kind of continues Looney Tunes, and it brings those antics to a new generation without really taking away anything from the original. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, overall, it is a great show. I definitely think that it at least deserves the top 10, more so than above top 10. Because I'm sure there are going to be some other shows showing up in the top 10 that should be swapped with some of the ones between 10 and 20. And 25.
Not to mention any show specifically.
Don't you mean 23?
Dirt, where do you weigh in on where Tiny Toons should go?
10 seems a little high to me, but at the same time, I think it's also because I kind of have this... I don't want to say it's necessarily a love-hate relationship with Tiny Toons, but it is one of those shows where I have to be in the right mood for it, and I think it's because of the humor and the zaniness and the speed of the show. It is one of those shows where, to me, it almost feels like overload a lot of times. There's so much going on. They're so quickly moving from one thing to the next. They're zipping out lines here and there, and maybe it's just because I'm old and, you know, watching some of this, like, slow down, you young whippersnappers, I can't follow, you know, but...
Get off my lawn!
Yeah, well, I had to yell that earlier, but it's just kind of one of those things where I recognize that it was very smartly written. I mean, it was written on a level that very few... anything gets written on, and it was one of those animated shows where your first impression is this is a little kid show, but I don't think there was anybody, you know, you'd walk through Hollywood and Steven Spielberg's involved in this. You know, you mention that to somebody and they'd be like, oh, really? And suddenly they respected the show. They may not have ever watched it, but it was one of those things that made people kind of pay attention to it and kind of go, well, you know, maybe animation isn't completely worthless. Maybe it's not completely dead, you know, type of deal. And so I recognize the importance of it. I had it in the 20s. Where did I have it? 28.
28,
so,
yeah.
Like, I 10 may be a little high, but at the same time, I can see why people would argue for it to be in the top 10, and I'm fine with that.
Well, to me, this along with a couple other shows that came out about the same time, I mean, this was a period where cartoons were almost dying. As far as, you know, they were doing away with Saturday morning cartoons in favor for Saturday morning Saved by the Bell type shows. And to me, there was a very few shows that, in my experience, kept cartoons alive for me during a decade in the 90s, especially that first half of the 90s, that I felt cartoons were almost just dropping off the face of the earth. So I give it credit for doing that. It's also, like you said, one of the first cartoons that catered to a new generation of ADD kids. But I don't know. Anybody else have thoughts on Tiny Toon?
Nope.
All right, then let's see what else we have in our top 10.
9.
Flintstones, meet the Flintstones, they're the Montessori family. From the town of Bedrock, they're a place right out of history. That's right, with the family dynasty, through the courtesy of birds to beat. When you're with the Flintstones, have a yabba dabba do time, a dabba do time, you'll have a gay old time.
Shame on you, the 5 people that did not vote for this show. Shame on you. You need to be hit. The godfather of primetime animation deserves even higher. Like 6 of us had it in our top 4. Flintstones should be higher than number 9. I know.
Alice, I'm home.
I don't know how many people agree with me or not, but I mean, I had it 4. Pixel Dan had it
number
3.
1.
Yeah, Dirt had it number 1. Birdman had it number 3. Terra had it number 3. Purple from BTVA had it number 3. It deserves to be in the top 3 or 4. And I don't understand how it can't be. It's one of the first successful primetime cartoon shows. It was an Emmy-nominated show. It was on for 6 seasons. Like Scooby-Doo, it's had a ton of different incarnations over the years. 2
or 3 live-action movies.
Yeah, let's start with Dirt. You had it number 1. I'm guessing you agree with me that this should be higher.
This should be... Yeah, should be number 1. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, there is no other animation if there hadn't been the Flintstones. Like, this is where animation became something more than that throwaway that you put in between movies. Mm-hmm. This is what made animation into legitimate. You know, as opposed to just something that occupies the kids while you're getting more popcorn. And for me, it goes back to that whole idea of the cultural impact. You know, there would be no animation. It's also every person in the United States knows who the Flintstones are.
Oh, yeah.
You know, there's no question. And
it's another one that's also been tried to be duplicated multiple times by other shows.
Yeah, and it's also one of those things where it's so part of Americana. If I walk into Target or Kmart or Walmart or someplace like that, and there's a rack of T-shirts and there's a Flintstones shirt on it, I don't think twice. Like, oh yeah, Flintstones. Sure, but why wouldn't it be there? If I walk in and there's a Jetsons shirt, I would be like, wow, Jetsons? Really? Huh. But if I walk in there and there's a Flintstone shirt, makes sense because it is part of our history, and not the history of animation, but the history of America, the history of television, the history of broadcasting, the history of, whatever. I mean, they took the honeymooners and they made it set in the prehistoric ages. But beyond that, if you're watching TV and a commercial comes on for Cascade dishwashing detergent and you see somebody grab an elephant nose out of the wall and spray it on their dishes, anywhere else, if you do that in Vietnam, people are going to be like, oh, they were over at Fan's house, But for us, we know that's a Flintstones reference. It's just... Yeah. You wouldn't think twice about that.
Well,
and just, to me, it's like I said, this should be number 1. I don't understand.
Well, let's see who else has tried to do this. Let's just take a family with a mom and dad and 2 or 3 kids, and let's make a primetime comedy out of it. About every other primetime comedy that's come since then, you talk about Family Guy ripping off Simpsons. How about Simpsons ripping off Flintstones? I know they're slightly different, but it's basically the same idea.
Oh, okay. I'll kind of grant you that, but with one exception. Simpsons is more leaning on the edge of PG-13 into R, whereas...
Well, that's because of the time period, though.
The Flintstones was just...
Flintstones could not do... it was 60s versus 90s.
Right.
And probably for its time, I'm pretty sure there were a handful of people who were looking at something like the Flintstones going, is that all Wilma's going to wear? She's showing the shoulder. I mean, you probably had that there were people that thought it was scandalous. She's not wearing shoes. You can see her bare ankles.
Well, but the thing of that time is, though, I mean, the thing of that cartoon in that time, though, nobody wore shoes in Bedrock. It's not just Wilma.
Well, no, but I'm just saying,
right?
Everything's a product of its time and generation, and if you want to say, well, Simpsons is different because it pushed the envelope. Well, I'm sure there are ways that this is pushing the envelope that doesn't mean anything to us now, because we just take it for granted. Everything. I remember the first time I saw Casablanca, and I thought, man, this movie is so cliche. Oh, wait a minute. Because everything else has ripped off Casablanca. So the first time I sat down and watched it, I'm like, this movie's just ripping off. Oh, I see.
I want to give Mike a chance to explain himself. In your opinion, there are 49 shows of all-time animated series better than the Flintstones?
And one of them was Jim?
Shut up.
Can I just say something? Mel Blanc, Dawes Butler, June.
Hey, I have never, in any of the shows, any of the past shows that we've talked about, I have never said anything bad about the voice cast, with exception of that fucking John K. show. But, the voice cast was great for this. Me putting it at 50, again, it goes back to, other shows I wanted to see that were higher, or wanted to see make the countdown, because I wasn't sure, obviously, who else was going to vote for shows that I might have voted for.
Can you just admit that you should be slapped for barely making this in your top 50?
No.
I can. Because you've argued before when other shows came on, we were talking about stuff like Magic School Bus being number 97 or whatever it was. You're like, I can't believe this, because we're talking the top 100 animated series of all time. Of all time, Jim and the Holograms is better than the Flintstones?
And again, I'll say it again. That's why we have 19 other people doing this.
This is recorded. You understand that. We can go back and pull out your quote and play it in a court of animation.
Oh, God.
This is one place where you failed to eliminate your bias.
This is where the IGN guys are going to be like, see, they can't even do it right.
Although they had this one, ironically, at the exact same spot we did. We both had Flintstones at number 9, which I guess at least we both had it in the top 10. Steve, we've left you completely out of this. Chime in on the Flintstones.
I did like this show. It is definitely a classic. It definitely deserves to be in the top 10 because of its just the fact that generations back to our parents know all about it, considering they grew up with it. And then again, we grew up with it as well. But I don't see how anybody could, vote some of these other, certain 80s shows ahead of the Flintstones.
So wait a second here. I get chastised for putting it at number 50, but no one chastised Steve for putting it at 40-4? Give me a fucking break here.
Excuse me, jackass. I had some other selections that were on my list that I was trying to make.
He didn't vote Gem number 6. That's why you got chastised.
I didn't even have Gem on my list.
See, more points for him.
We would not have chastised you had had legitimate shows ahead of it. I'm just giving you a hard time, Mike. But Steve, continue.
But yes, I did have legitimate shows ahead of it. But anyways, yeah, I definitely think this deserves to be in the top 10. And yeah, it is kind of odd. IGN actually tied us there, but again, IGN doesn't really care because, look at our difference in our list and the shows that showed up, and look at their piece of shit. So,
Kevin has said before about that, our bias comes in at 80s and superheroes. Well, IGN's bias comes in at fucking Adult Swim and anime. So, it's not any different. Every list is going to have a bias somewhere.
Yeah, I agree with that, but Gem...
Our bias is more right.
I'm just kidding, Mike. I will leave Gem alone from now on, I promise.
No, don't. This
Dirt
is awesome.
But I will.
You better be careful. 2012, we might see a Gem podcast.
Oh, God.
By yourself.
I'll never hear it.
Nobody ever will.
8.
I'm going down south, I'm gonna have myself a time.
Friendly faces everywhere, humble folks without temptation.
Going down south, I'm gonna leave my woes behind.
Ample parking day or night, people starting party never.
Heading on up south, I'm gonna see if I can't unwind. Come on down south, I can meet some friends of mine.
So another one, we have 8 people that have this one in their top 10, and talk about longevity, which I know in and of itself does not mean everything, but coming in at number 8, another primetime show. Kind of odd that this one backed up with Flintstones, but South Park coming in at number 8. IGN had it at number 4. Birdman had it at number 2. Like I said, a bunch of people had it in their top 10, except for, of course, Mike. But South Park, I understand that some people wouldn't vote for this and some people would, because it's one of those where you either like it or you don't, kind of like some of the other adult primetime shows. But I think just first of all, how long it's been on. Second of all, I was anti-South Park when I was growing up. I hated the group of people at my school that liked South Park. I thought, this is stupid, but that's because I never gave it a chance. And then I finally, at one point, the first South Park exposure I ever had was the movie Bigger, Longer, and Uncut. And I watched that movie, and I said, holy crap, this is genius writing. Like, this is actually really freaking clever. And just the statements that are made in this show that I think all the people that don't like the show are oblivious to is where the genius in South Park lies, and I'm very happy that it's in our top 10. Dirt, how do you feel?
Yeah, I agree. This is about where I had it on my list anyway, so this seems right to me. This is one of those shows where I can understand why some people wouldn't necessarily like it. It would be controversial. Some people don't like the attitude. Some people don't like the just crassness of it a lot of times.
The unrated G part.
Yeah, well, but there are a lot of the show. When they originally started, obviously, they were using construction paper cutouts and doing the stop-motion animation, and they converted that over to a computerized system. And I remember at some point the whole Elian Gonzalez thing was going on, when the SWAT team went in and took the little boy back to Cuba. And then, like 4 days later, on that episode of South Park, they go to grab, whoever out of the closet, and it's that scene. It's those photographs from the Associated Press. It's the SWAT team goes in and they recreated that whole, and you had just seen that unfold live on TV a couple days beforehand, and they're already spoofing it on the show because they perfected their system for flipping things around, and it just shows like, I just remember sitting there thinking, these guys have figured out not only like how to get this animation system down where it doesn't look, at the time you looked at it and you're like, this doesn't seem like a computer thing. This seems like pieces of cardboard or construction paper cut out. But the fact that they could so quickly take something from the news, from pop culture, from what was happening in the world around you, and spoof it. Yeah. And put it on the show. That used to be Saturday Night Live was the only place you could see something like that. And now you're seeing that on an animated series.
It reminded me of like those Law & Order commercials, ripped from the headlines.
Well, yeah, and that's exactly it, because it was just, you got that instantaneous reflection, and for a while there it was almost like, is this something cool? Is this something we can talk about? I don't know. Did they do it on South Park yet? It's just kind of that wink back at pulp culture, and the show has gone through its ups and downs, and there are times where it took itself a little too seriously, and then there were times that it just, they had their Fat Elvis period where they just got drunk and they didn't care what they were doing, they were just doing the show. But I mean, where else are you having shows that are tackling things like gay Cub Scout leaders, or talking about things like the difference between the Lebanese and lesbians, and talking about Scientology, and straight up going, yeah, hey, this is what Scientology teaches, believe it or not, and throwing it out there. And
and I think some people don't get some of those messages. They just see it as, oh, this is the show that it cusses a lot and there's a lot of vulgarity. And
it makes fun of crippled kids.
And it can't be good. But some of the messages, just take from that movie. I know we're talking about the series, but that movie where it's like talking about, basically everybody trying to blame someone else for the problems. Blame Canada or, blame everybody except for the parents who are the ones responsible for teaching the kids that are watching this how to deal with it.
Yeah, and it's just, there's something, on the one hand, it's very juvenile, and at the same time, it's exceptionally brilliant.
And that's what makes it brilliant, yeah, is the fact that it can be so juvenile but still have these messages. Now, I know we've been leaving Mike and Steve out of it because I don't think have the same love, and I don't love the show, but I've never... Like I said, I grew up hating it, and yet everything I've ever actually watched of it, I've liked. So, Mike, why don't you weigh in? I
didn't outright hate it. When it first came on, it was one of those things where it just wasn't, it just wasn't in my wheelhouse as far as that goes, but I mean...
It was a rare thing for me where I hated it because it was popular, I think.
With me sometimes that's all the time with things that are popular, but this one is, ultimately it is the best satire cartoon ever. I mean, just the things that they satirize in this cartoon.
The Harley episode is awesome. Sorry.
Say what you want about the animation, say what you want about, the things that they hit on and all that, but it's just, I don't know. For what it is, it's amazing. Yes, I will agree with Dirt. It does have has its ups and downs. I was almost going to say it kind of was like The Simpsons, where The Simpsons had really, really great seasons, and then they just have kind of just gone down and down and down and down. But this one has had a resurgence and had, really great writing, and Matt, Trey Parker and Matt Stone, Trey Parker as Cartman, oh my God.
Well, and I'm glad you brought up the animation, too, because this is one of the rare cases where I will have an exception to the rule where I don't like the animation style, but I'm able to look past it. I'm usually not able to do that, but with this one I can. I mean, I don't think anyone will say anything is going to rave about the animation in this.
Actually, I'm wondering, did anybody else, this was one of those things where I was in college at the time that this came out, so this kind of fit well with Southern Comfort. And it was one of those things where I actually discovered the Jesus versus Santa Claus short that they did before the series came out. And so then so I was like the fan of this little underground film where this baby Jesus, or actually the first one was Frosty and Jesus, and the second one was Santa Claus and Jesus. But I was a fan of these little short films. I was like, oh my God, this thing is crazy. And then I found out those guys were getting a series. And so that made me excited for the series because they were these underground animator guys. I mean, did anybody else discover those short films, or did you just come right in with the show?
Well, I came in really late. Like I said, I came in with the actual movie because this came out when I was in high school, and I just didn't. At the time, I didn't like it because it was popular, and the group of people that liked it would always get together to watch it every week when it came out or when it aired or whatever. So I came along later in the game. I don't know about Mike or Steve.
Yeah, I didn't catch those at all. I only caught it when the show premiered. I think what really hit me at the time when it first premiered, it was like right after the episode where Cartman goes, knock off all that tree-hugging hippie crap.
Mike, one thing that... Mike, I forgot to ask you, though. You said a few things about South Park, but does it deserve to be in our top 10?
I think for what it's accomplished, yeah.
Okay. I think Steve's going to be the other opinion on this. Am I right, Steve?
Yeah,
Are you a tree-loving hippie? Is that why you're upset?
No.
I'm Megatron. Big difference.
But...
You eat trees.
No. What?
I said you eat trees.
No.
Because you're a dinosaur.
I break them with my forehead.
There you go.
But yeah, I liked the show at the time. I don't so much care for it now. I one of my first exposures, I don't remember how old I was, but my dad took me to see the South Park movie in the theater. I'm pretty sure I was like, I don't know, 16 something, I don't know. Mm-hmm. I don't remember. But anyways, I was still in school, and I was like, yeah, that's kind of entertaining. And then I watched how many times they dropped the F-bomb in the movie, and I was reading it in the paper, and I was like, wow, that's awesome, 136 times. And then, which I think is pretty damn close. But, and the V-chip in the movie, that was awesome too. But, need that for Mike. But, before I light that fire, I'm going to have to say that the show does do a lot better hitting on pop culture as well as political BS. Learn how to spell jackass. It does hit on that better than Simpsons or or Family Guy or anything else. So I mean, in that sense, it is nicer. But I still prefer. I would probably rather watch Family Guy over this at this point.
See, that's where Steve and I differ, because like sometimes like late at night I'll catch an episode of Family Guy on Adult Swim, and it's like, okay, what else is on? And then I'll like turn over to like the WGN channel, and there'll be like 2 back-to-back episodes of South Park. I can sit there and watch South Park late at night just because it's probably the only thing on at like midnight, 1 a.m.
Yeah, like I said, it seems like with these adult or these more primetime shows that it's a lot more. You either like one or you don't, and there's a lot more people that are either in this crowd or they're in that crowd. You know, there's the Futurama crowd, there's the King of the Hill crowd, there's the Family Guy crowd, or the South Park crowd. So I mean, you don't often find someone that likes all of them, as far as what I've experienced. So
well, and also again, it goes back to that idea that they're not afraid to tackle anything, so they do turn viewers off.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think there is something to be said for the bravery of being able to say, well, you know what, we're going to have Christopher Reeve just sucking apart fetus spines to get the cells that he needs in order to keep himself alive. And I'm sure there are a lot of people that were kind of pissed off about that. But you know what? If you can't laugh at something, then there's something wrong with your outlook on it.
7.
It's time for Animaniacs, and we're zany to the max. So just sit back and relax, you'll laugh till you collapse. We're Animaniacs. Come join the Warner Brothers
and the Warner Sister Dot.
Just for fun we run around the Warner movie lot. They lock us in the tower whenever we get caught, but we break loose and bend the moose, and now you know the plot. We're Animaniacs. Dot is cute and Yakko yaks. Wacko packs away the snacks while Bill Clinton plays the sax. We're Animaniacs.
So at number 10 we had Tiny Toon Adventures, and at number 7 we have Animaniacs. And I don't know how the rest of you feel, but as far as what I feel, I am glad that this one is higher out of the two. I loved Tiny Toons. I absolutely loved Animaniacs. I actually had it at number 9. We had some people had it at 1, 8, 7, 7, 9. So I mean, a lot of people had it in there. Nobody had it lower than 48. So everybody that voted, the 15 people that voted for it, had it in their top 50. Again, cleaned up as at the award show, just like Tiny Toons did. It was on for 5 seasons. IGN had this ranked at 17. I actually think this one deserves more to be in the top 10 than Tiny Toons does. Mike, do you agree or disagree that this deserves to be higher than Tiny Toons?
Tiny Toons was the launching of the musical type cartoon, but this took it to a whole new level.
Rob Paulson.
Yeah, honestly, between Rob Paulson, Travis McNeil, and Jess Harnell, that's all you really need to say, because
LaMarche.
Well, yeah, LaMarche too, but I mean, like, well, Rob and Jess specifically because of, Wacko's America and Yakko's, oh god,
everything.
Yakko's World, Yakko's Planets, just everything. This is one of those shows that was really, really great and introduced us to a bunch of really, really great characters.
Well, you have music, you have comedy, you have educational. I mean, you have a lot of different elements being done very well, and I don't know. To me, like I was saying with Tiny Toons, and I didn't want to mention this actual show, but to me, this is what was cartoons in the 90s, was Animaniacs and Tiny Toons. That's what saved it when it seemed like everything was going down a very bad path. And it resurrected itself, towards the end of the 90s, but for a while there, cartoons was in a dark time, and to me, Animaniacs and Tiny Toons was just these hidden gems that just, carried all of cartoondom for a little while. Now, Dirt, I want to talk to you for a minute because you had Tiny Toons and you somewhat agreed with where we put that and you had that on your list, but you did not vote for Animaniacs, and I haven't met very many people that like one and don't like the other.
Well, two things. I mean, the first thing is going back to that whole idea of I've got one, so that kind of represents the other. And gotcha. I do kind of link these shows together. I would never say that, they're the same show, but they do kind of occupy the same space for me in my mind. But as zany and loony and frantic as Tiny Toons was, this was that times 10, times 50, So I just have a difficult time watching the show. Like, I can't process. There's tiger blood running through the veins of the show or something. I can't.
Cannot believe
I tried watching this show, actually. I tried watching the show probably about 4 or 5 months ago. I don't remember exactly why, but for whatever reason, I was like, oh, Animaniacs, I haven't seen that in a long time, and I tried watching that, and I was just like, blood started coming out of my ears, and the scanners are going to make my head explode. I have to turn it off and walk away, because it was just too much. And I can take the argument of people saying it was a better show. I think in many ways it was even more intelligently written, the way it would throw in references to the Bolshevik Revolution in the middle of this musical number, and you were like, a lot of people wouldn't understand what it means to get a little Anastasia, but it's just one of those things that it would throw into the show, and I appreciate that. But at the same time, to me, this and Tiny Toons, I picked Tiny Toons because that to me is more of the trailblazer, whereas this one just more kind of perfected it, and I tend to go with the one that set the stage as opposed to the one that cleaned it up. Yeah. So I voted for Tiny Toons and not for this one.
Well, luckily for me, I have some Adonis DNA, so I was able to stomach the quick pace of this. But no, I even use this in the classroom, actually, to try to teach certain things or try to be extra credit for people trying to recite the countries of the world or different stuff like that. So I just think there's some very memorable skits in this show that anybody that saw it as a kid remembers. And there's not many times where I can do that with other cartoons where I'm like, I remember that exact part or I remember that exact episode, and I can do that with this one. Steve, how do you feel about the whole Tiny Toons versus Animaniacs, and do either of them deserve to be in our top 10, or which ones do? Whatever. How do you feel?
Honestly, I prefer Animaniacs over Tiny Toons, and that's just because it's just such a random show. And then you've got all the side things like Mime Time, and then you've got, Pinky and the Brain's original incarnation. You've got Freakazoid appearing in there. You've got Slappy Squirrel. You've got that girl that runs up with saying, "Okay, I love you, bye bye." And
Mindy.
Then,
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, you've got all these random wacky parts that just typically don't fit together in a cartoon,
right?
And somehow mesh really well.
Hello, nurse.
And then you've got all these, zany characters and the voices that go with them. So I mean, it's just such an awesome show overall.
Well, and I think another thing I like about it is how much they poke fun at their own selves as far as like the company and the history of the company and things about Warner Brothers in general. And I thought that was a clever thing to do as far as use even the people that are paying your paycheck, that are writing your paychecks and signing them, and make fun of them too.
Would you like to take a survey?
I mean, that's what I'm saying. Look at how many memorable characters, quotes, skits, segments. It's ridiculous.
I love the one where they're helping Michelangelo repaint the Sistine Chapel. And the excellency that he keeps referring to shows up at the very end, and it's an animated version of Steven Spielberg.
Exactly. That is awesome.
Yes.
So, I mean, regardless of whether you like Tiny Toons better or you like Animaniacs, I don't think either one of them can be denied top 20. If I was to pick, I would put Tiny Toons in the 10 to 20 mark and Animaniacs in the top 10, but that's just me. But they're just both so brilliantly done that, you can't really say a lot of bad stuff about them unless you're Mike's favorite person.
6.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Heroes in a half shell. Turtle power. They're the world's most fearsome fighting team.
We're really hip.
They're heroes in the half shell, and they're green.
Hey, get a grip.
When the evil Shredder attacks, these turtle boys don't cut them no slack.
So another 80s entry into our countdown, and I said, I had no problem with He-Man being in the top 20. I actually have no problem with this show being in the top 10. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was on for so long, as far as 10 different seasons, almost 200 episodes, and to me, this was not really comparable to the rest of the 80s action shows, because this one had all that campy, comedy, quirky, mixed in with running alongside some of the most popular or most successful live-action movies that took off on these cartoons, and they were both kind of doing that at the same time period. I don't know. To me, you can't compare this to as much to like a G.I. Joe or He-Man or those shows. This was its own entity. This came afterwards and blazed a new trail for me as far as what kids were into. So I have no problem with this being in the top 10. I would probably put it a little closer to the 10 mark than the 5 mark, with it coming in at 6. But I would no way in hell put it at 55 like IGN.
Yeah, no, this for me, like, Transformers was over. Voltron had been over. Thundercats was just ending. This to me, like Kevin said, was the next thing. I mean, this was from 1987 to about 1996. I always watched this show, and I just absolutely loved it. It was like, after Transformers died and the Transformers toys weren't really in stores anymore because this had come along and this was the next new popular thing. And it just became a hunt to find all the toys and to watch the cartoon, and it was just amazing. You've got an amazing voice cast. Oh, yeah. Great stories. We said earlier when we were talking about the 2003 reimagining that the 2003 version kind of married together the really serious part of the comics that came before this cartoon and also the comedy bits from this cartoon, so that series wasn't totally cheesy and it wasn't totally dark. It was a nice marriage between the two. This one, because you had those really, really dark comics, you had to have something that was like this, that had this humor that it had. And it was just amazing.
Yeah, and just a couple other things. It did have 2 Young Artist Award nominations. There was only 3 people that did not put this on their list. I do need to figure out who those 3 people are, so I can do bad things to them. But I don't know. I don't know a single kid that was growing up in this time frame from 1987 to 1996 that was not a Turtles fan at some point. Maybe not for the entire run, but at some point it seemed like everybody was a Turtles fan. I think we're all going to basically agree because we all have this pretty high on our list. So, Steve, you had it at 8 instead of 6. I had it at 7. Mike had it at 4. We're all about the same. So, Steve, how do you feel about this coming in at number 6 compared to 55?
I'm happier that it came in, obviously, than 55. 55 is just stupid. This is one of the longest running series, that it's had such a fan following. Plus, it's had newer incarnations. Plus, it's getting a new version this year. Mm-hmm. So, that's just batshit retarded to put the original that high on their list.
Well, how many have had an original series how many franchises have had an original series that lasted a decade and a second series that lasted 7 years?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's unheard of.
Oh yeah, and none of the others, even a lot of the other 80s series, never got this popular, and to not have it in your top 10 is just batshit retarded.
Well, and, I said only 3 people did not vote for this, and everybody that did vote for it had it in their top 50 at least. So nobody had it as low as IGN. Dirt, you had it a little bit lower. You had it at 21. So do you think this should not quite be this high, or how do you feel about it coming in at 6?
There's no way this should be above the Flintstones.
Well, you could say that with almost every show.
But, because I had it as number 1, so I would say that about every show. But,
exactly.
I definitely understand the cultural phenomenon that it was, and I certainly give it credit for that because I have used that as a defense for some of the other shows. But for me, looking at it, I didn't think the animation was that great. I didn't think the stories were necessarily that great. So that's why I didn't have it as high as some of the other shows. It's not a show that I definitely give it respect for the fact that it was on so long. It produced so many episodes that it was part of, again, the toys, the lunchboxes, the clothes, the pajamas, the sleeping bags, that there's definitely something to it as being part of something bigger than itself. But at the same time, it's not a show that I really ever want to go back and watch all that often. If I'm in a room and it's on... Oh, well, the live-action movie, sure. But it's just, for me, it just doesn't, the stories were not that great, the animation wasn't that great, so I just don't think it should be this high on the list. This just seems just a little too, I don't know, it's just that character bias, that whole, people just vote for what they like. And people like it, so it goes up that high, but I don't think it stands as tall as some of the other shows that are in the top 10.
Well, and I think it just illustrates the point that this type of thing that we're doing would be a lot easier if we were trying to break it down by decade or something. Like a top 80s list would be a lot easier. It's when you start to compare things that are from different time periods that it really starts to become a complex situation. As far as where we have it ranked as far as the other 80s shows, I don't necessarily have a problem with it, but I think I'm going to have to hold my other thoughts on that for a little bit later.
Why, are you saying there's more 80s shows coming?
There just might be.
Well, then I guess people have to keep listening.
Keep listening, folks. We're down to our final 5.
5.
Life is like a hurricane, get in, duck, bird, race cars, lasers, aeroplanes. It's a duck blur. Might solve a mystery or rewrite history. DuckTales, woo!
So staying in the 80s, actually staying in the exact same year, and also another show where only 3 people left it off their list. I will save my comments about them for later, but our first entry in the top 5, DuckTales. And we were wondering about the other Disney shows, so let's just talk about straight up Disney shows. Does this, since we've seen, I think, all the other ones that we expect to see, is this deserving as the number 1 Disney show of all time, Mike?
Yes.
Dirt?
Did I not put this on my list?
There's a chance when I'm putting this many names down that I can miss one, but I'd have to go back and check.
Yeah, if this isn't on my list, then that's my fault. This does deserve to be on the list. Yeah, I did love this show. I think it does hold up well the test of time. I think it was ingenious for the way it took classic characters and reinvented them in a way that was kind of fresh and new and exciting, and still paid homage to the classic style of the characters that people grew up with. I think it had some great writing. It had great stories. It had great voice acting. And so if I left this off my list, then that's my fault.
Yeah, I checked back and I don't have it on the list that you gave me. Is it better than all the other Disney shows? Is it better than Rescue Rangers, Tailspin, Darkwing Duck, and what was the other one that we had on our list? Gargoyles. Is it better than all those?
Yes.
Okay. We'll come back to both Mike and Dirt in a second. Steve, is it the best Disney show of all time?
Yes, I'd have to say this is the number one. I think all of the Disney shows have fallen right into place with where they belong.
And I think that's something that's almost an easier way to look at our list. Instead of just saying, overall, is it coming in the right spot? It's almost actually easier to say, breaking it down into its genre, like adult, primetime cartoons. Did we get them in the right order regardless of where they fell? 80s action shows. Did we get them in the right order regardless of where they fell? And Disney shows or, whatever. I think that's almost a better way to look at it. And we'll figure out the placement maybe in a future date. But, IGN had this at 18. We have it at 5. So we've established that it's the best Disney cartoon of all time. Is it a top 10 of all time, much less top 5, Mike?
Yeah, I think so. It was one of those ones that had amazing characterizations, not just using the Disney characters, but putting them in like a real, like we talked before about when we talked about Tailspin, putting the Jungle Book characters in a real life, everyday setting, putting the Disney characters like Scrooge and Donald and the nephews and all that. And, creating, I believe didn't this show create Launchpad specifically, or was Launchpad an existing character before?
It was on 2 different shows. Launchpad was on 2 shows. I'm trying to remember real quick. I'll get
Darkwing and DuckTales.
Yeah.
He was on DuckTales.
Right, no, what I'm saying is, before DuckTales, wasn't Launchpad someone that was, Launchpad isn't like a Goofy or a Donald. He wasn't a pre-existing Disney character.
No, he was, I think, made for DuckTales.
Right, he was made for this show, and then he jumped over to Darkwing. Just having him in here, just all the different adventures. I mean, just showing how greedy Scrooge is, but he still has a heart. He still will do the right thing at the end of the day. And that theme song. Everybody remembers that theme song.
Yes. That theme song, for the record, is easily one of the best 5 theme songs of the 80s or 90s. That's my stance on that. But, Mike, I want to ask you one quick question, because you've said it's the best Disney, and you say it does deserve to be in the top 10.
Why did I rank it 56? Blah,
yes.
blah, blah, blah.
Why did you rank it 56?
Again.
Could have boosted it up a spot if you would have voted for it higher, probably.
Yeah, I know. I don't know what I was thinking in that 6 hours.
Okay. At some point, the brain shut off. Okay.
Yes.
Dirt or Steve, do either one of you, I didn't give you a lot of chance to talk before. We established as best Disney. Does it deserve the number 5 spot?
I guess that kind of depends on what 1 through 4 are.
Okay. Besides that, we know Flintstones should be higher.
Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of tough. I kind of feel... I don't know that it necessarily would have belonged in the top 10.
Okay.
I think I enjoyed it. I thought it was a lot of fun. I thought there are a lot of shows that were executed a lot better. I think there were shows that were written a lot better. I think there were shows that had better animation. So I don't know exactly where I would have put it, but I don't think I would have had it in the top 10.
Steve?
I probably would have put it above the top 10, honestly.
So somewhere in the 10 to 20 range, or?
Yeah, more so there.
Okay. Well, I think it's undeniable as the best Disney show that it deserves discussion somewhere, in this episode. As far as I'm concerned, top 20. I don't know specifically where I would put it if I was doing the list again. I had it at number 10 when we did it, but I don't know. I think it's an interesting first edition of our top 5, and only 4 spots left, obviously.
4.
So remember Dirt's reaction when we talked about Flintstones, because that's my reaction now, because my number 1 pick is coming in at number 4, and I think it's a travesty of all travesties.
What?
And that is Looney Tunes. Now, I understand that some people were trying to say that this shouldn't qualify because it was never an animated series. Yes, I realize that these were theatrical shorts, but there was also they did use the Looney Tunes title to designate a half-hour series that was made up of these theatrical shorts, so it definitely does qualify. At some points they called it Merry Melodies or Looney Tunes or whatever, and I'm sure there's Looney Tunes historians that might, be able to expand more than I am. But Looney Tunes, to me, is obvious number one of all time. Some people had it at number 2. Dirt and Mike, you both had it at number 2. Number 4? I don't know. IGN had it at number 3, so we're not very far off from them. I'm speechless.
I'm probably going to have to stop podcasting after this episode, honestly. I'm never doing a list like this ever again.
You're fired.
You can't fire me. You don't even fucking pay me.
This again goes to this whole idea of, well, what's number 1, 2, and 3? Because on the one hand, I had this as my number 2. I had this behind Flintstones. For me, Flintstones was just a revolution in animation and animated series. I made this number 2 just because, again, cultural impact. I don't know if there's anybody on the planet except maybe a factory worker in North Korea that doesn't know who Bugs Bunny is. You know what I mean? So I guess I'd have to see what 1, 2, and 3 are before I can fully digest what my reaction is to this being number 4.
Beyond that, though, what about the 4 people that did not vote this? I pray to God that the 4 people that did not put this on their list were saying that it shouldn't technically be considered an animated series.
Yeah, I can understand that because they, like you said, they started as theatrical shorts, in between the newsreels, and eventually they put them into a package that was sold into syndication, and that's where we're familiar with it. So I can see the argument. If someone wants to make that argument that it doesn't count as an animated series the same way as, The Simpsons or G.I. Joe or Transformers or whatever, because of the way it was repackaged and sent out there, then I can understand that side of the argument. So again, it just kind of depends on, well, what's considered the 1, 2, and 3 then?
Well, I'm going to actually throw names out, though, because I'm hoping that they'll maybe call in and leave us a response as to what their reasoning was, because it's not like they're dumb individuals here. It's Scotty and Christopher Stapleton from Chicken Pot Pod and Mike Birdman Dodd are
you mean
3
Scotty
of them.
Cash?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought you said these people aren't stupid.
Well, I don't know Scotty.
Oh, low blow.
I don't know Scotty. But I'm just saying those 3 in particular did not vote for this show, so please tell me that you guys were just saying that this is not an animated series, so it doesn't qualify. I hope that's your reasoning. And that's actually why I actually sent a second email out, was for stuff like this when people didn't leave it on their list, just to make sure it wasn't just people who forgot stuff. But I don't know. Steve, what do you feel about Looney Tunes?
This should have been like number 1 or 2, at least.
I agree, and since Mike and Dirt and I all voted at 1 or 2, we can back that up.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't vote it that high, but still,
yeah.
It's a timeless classic.
Well, I don't know. I'm just so blown. Maybe it's the 4 people that left it off because they're not saying it's a series. Because if any of those people vote for it, they obviously are going to put it in their top 50. If not top 10. So that would
top
be
5.
So I'm just saying that would be a lot more points. So maybe it would have completely changed things. But I don't know. I'm speechless. To me, this is number 1, and like Dirt said, Flintstones should be right with it at the top. 3 left, folks. It's getting interesting.
It's scary.
Very fucking scary.
This is Scourge, presenting number 3.
The Transformers, more than meets the eye. Autobots wage their battle to destroy the evil forces of the Decepticons. The Transformers, robots in disguise.
So another one that 16 people voted for, and only 3 of them had it not in their top 30. A lot of people had this in their top 10 or top 20. kind of goes back to that bias we talked about in episode 20, and that is Transformers Generation 1 from 1984 coming in at number 3. Now, to preface this, I think all of us will agree that this is too high of a placement.
This is extremely too high.
Now, but I think you have to take into account, number one, the group of people that are in this, the 20 people, are a lot of Transformers fans, so that probably played some part of what happened here. But please don't be too mean to us, because we're all in agreement that this is probably too high. It is too high.
I wonder if because you did this by the rank, adding the points together. Mm-hmm. I almost wonder if you redid the list, doing the average of the people who voted for it.
Yeah.
So if only 10 people voted for it, but those 10 people all made it number 2, then that would rank it higher than the way this had been put together. Because
well, see, what I wasn't expecting when we did this, and I'll probably get more into this in the wrap up. I wasn't expecting as many things to be completely left off of lists, I guess, is what I wasn't expecting.
Yeah.
But there were way too many cartoons to sit there and rank. So
yeah, I mean, if we made this like say next year we do another project like this, instead of doing top 100, we did top 200. I guarantee you this would rank anywhere from the top 50, maybe the top 60.
I think it would still come in. No, I'd actually disagree with that. But I guess my question is, we're all saying that it's too high at number 3. IGN had it at 23. Is that, should it be around there? Should it be higher than that, lower than that? Where should it come in on just our list of top 100?
Compared to our list, I think if you switched this and Flintstones, I would be okay with it. Have this at number 9 and Flintstones at number 3.
Yeah, that would seem to make a lot more sense.
Or even have Flintstones at number 4 and Looney Tunes at number 3. I honestly have to say that I think IGN got it better at 23 than we did.
Now, I think the other question is, let's take a step back then and just compare it to the other 80s shows we've seen in the top 20, which was He-Man, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and G.I. Joe. Where should those stack? What should the order of those 4 shows be, Dirt?
Wait, hit me again.
Transformers, He-Man, G.I. Joe, and what was the other one, Kev?
I threw Turtles in there, even though it's a little bit later.
I'd probably put Turtles at 4. I'd make this one probably 3. Then G.I. Joe, and then He-Man would be the first of the 4.
How about you, Steve?
I would probably have to say that Ninja Turtles would have to be the highest, and then having G.I. Joe, Transformers, and He-Man.
Mike?
I would put Transformers the lowest, and put Turtles probably the highest.
You'd put Transformers lower than G.I. Joe?
Yeah.
That surprises me.
Just because, again...
it doesn't surprise me if the rest of us say that. It surprises me that you say that.
Well... I went through a full-on 24-episode podcast reviewing the entire series, and just looking at it analytically, G.I. Joe was way better. Analytically, G.I. Joe is better. Nostalgia-wise, I prefer Transformers, but there's just so many issues with G1.
You know, I'm not surprised that it came in this high because I knew we were going to have an 80s action bias. But I am surprised that I never, ever, ever expected it to beat things like Looney Tunes or Flintstones.
Well, and here's the other thing. It's like...
Or Scooby-Doo.
I'm looking at these numbers, and I just kind of real quick tried to add them up and take an average of where people rank them who had this on their list. And doing it that way, it shows up 18.6875 is the number that I get doing a quick and dirty average there. And for me, 18 out of 100, that makes a lot of sense for this series.
Yeah. I'd agree with that.
So we'll see. Maybe we'll put out a second version or something that has the averages just to see what it would have done.
Or we should do a top 200 next year instead of a top 100.
Well, I don't think it's necessary that we have to do a top 200. I think first of all, everybody's, obviously we've seen a lot of things and shows have been brought up that people forgot about, or reasonings have been brought up that people didn't think about. there's different ways to adjust it. But I mean, everybody that's listening, you don't need to write 1,000 comments that we put this too high, because we're agreeing.
Yeah, we know we put this way too high. The only saving grace for this series, for me, as I said before, analytically and not looking at it nostalgia-wise, is the voice acting.
Oh, the voice acting is incredible, and what does it for me is the animated movie, actually, with the deaths.
Right.
But that's a whole other story.
Yeah, but the movie isn't the series.
No, I know. That's why I'm saying it's a whole other story.
Yeah, it's a whole other...
Yeah, I mean, just again, I would be very interested to see if you took all the same data and just compiled it a different way, came up with a different set of statistics.
I'm going to be up a long time tonight.
If 5 people out of 20 rate something as being number 10, how does that compare to when you've got 15 people rating something as number 17 or whatever?
I think what you get into then is what if you only have like a show that got voted on by 2 people, but both people put it at number 1.
Right. I think, we've talked about this before. We will bring it up in the wrap-up show, but if we do revisit this exact list with this data, I think that, Kevin, we should do the data another way, like Dirt is saying, and just figure it a different way.
No, I will do that regardless, just to see what would have happened, because I'm curious now, even though I know that's going to cost.
But what I'm saying is for next year to, we've talked about it, and we'll talk about it again, about updating the list, like maybe once a year. Maybe we'll do that from next year.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to do it with the data for this just to see what would have happened, and we'll see if that would have made a big difference or not, but I'm not looking forward to that project.
Well, I also kind of wonder if you weight it in such a way also where 2 people are the only 2 people that voted for it, and they voted at number 1, but then you've got something else where 10 people voted for the same thing, and they all voted for it number 1, that would outrank
the I'll
10
come up
people
with a
voting
way.
for it. So I almost wonder if there's do better math.
Yeah, I love my mathematical formula, so I'll come up with another way. But let's see what our final 2 are.
2.
So this one that's coming in at number 2 on our list came in at number 1 on a lot of people's lists. Number 1 on Jackson from BTVA, number 1 on Mike Laidman, number 1 on Birdman Dodd, number 1 on Mike's, and number 1 on IGN's. Number 2 for us, blowing away everything that came before it by over 300 points, and that is The Simpsons. One person left it off of their list.
Wait. This isn't. Oh, now I'm really wondering what the hell number 1's going to be, because I think I know, but I'm hoping I'm right, because if that one show isn't number 1, we have a real problem, since it hasn't even shown up on the list yet.
Oh, all right. So there's still hope for Ultimate Muscle.
No, there isn't. There was never hope for Ultimate Muscle.
21 seasons of The Simpsons so far, or, I mean, more than 21 seasons, more than 440 episodes. Obviously, I said it was ranked number 1 on IGN, and I think this is the example where it's strictly based on the longevity. And that's why I did not vote for this number 1.
Simpsons...
Because
when it started, when it launched on Fox, not the Tracy Ullman shorts, but when it launched on Fox, and then it waited a year and went through its animation changes. Because if you watch that first season, you're like, who the hell are these characters? They don't look like the people, the animation that I know. 90 to 91 to 92, those 3 years was Simpsons mania. You could not spit half a mile and you would hit a piece of Simpsons merchandise.
That is an interesting phrase.
It's true.
Spit half a mile?
You know what I mean?
Half a mile.
You know what I mean?
I think
swing a dead cat without hitting Simpsons.
yeah, there you go. You couldn't throw a cat without hitting the Simpsons merchandise.
You couldn't swing a dead cat without hitting bootleg Simpsons merchandise.
Yeah, that's true too.
To be fair, though, I've never seen any type of list done by anybody of animated series that doesn't put this in the top 1, 2, or 3. So we're not alone. Obviously, IGN put it at 1, we put it at 2. To me, though, it's not as good as people... To me, it's overrated slightly. just because of how long it's been on. I'm not saying that it doesn't deserve to be number 1, 2, or 3 somewhere in there. It obviously probably does, but I put it at number 6 because I just think there's some other ones that are better to me. Looney Tunes is better to me. Flintstones, a couple of those other shows are better to me than this. So I don't know. Steve, you didn't put this even near your number 1, so are you in agreement that this is somewhat of an overrated show?
Yeah, I'd have to say so. I think it's past its prime. It needs to go.
Should we throw somebody under the bus who didn't put it on their list?
Yeah.
JT from Saskatoon.
Well,
JT, you better be calling the voicemail line and leaving us some explanation.
To be fair, JT is Canadian, so they probably didn't have it up there.
To be fair, JT could have put this at his number 1, and it would still be our number 2. So it made no difference.
I will agree with Steve that in recent years, it's kind of gone downhill. I think after season 9 or 10, it's kind of taken this slow decline. And it used to be, oh my God, every Sunday at 8 o'clock, turn on Fox and watch The Simpsons. Now it'll get to Sunday night at 8:30. I'm like, damn it, I missed The Simpsons, but it really wasn't that big of a deal. And it's not. I will agree, the show overall is kind of overrated, but in the beginning, I don't think it was. I think it deserved every bit of success that it's gotten up until a certain point. I don't know. It's just one of those things where you could argue either way for this show, but I don't know, it's just something that I'm hoping, and I've said this before in other shows, I'm betting they're going to let it ride out till the 25th season and just end it somehow.
I could see that. Dirt, what are your opinions on Simpsons?
I actually failed a math course in college because of Simpsons. My second year of college, I was taking whatever math. I need a credit. There's a requirement in order to get a diploma. I just take whatever class, and the class was at 6 p.m. And in Bloomington, Normal, Illinois, 6 p.m. there was an hour block of Simpsons on WYZZ 43, and boy, 9 times out of 10, I did not make it to math because I did not want to miss that hour of syndicated Simpsons. That's how I was dedicated to that show for the first, 5, 7, 10 years. I couldn't even begin to imagine. Nowadays, I don't even watch it anymore. It hit some point 5 years ago, maybe it was 7 years ago. I don't know. I'm getting old, but at some point, it just kind of hit that. It's redoing the same jokes that it used to do. It's riding the coattails of its own success, and I kind of gave up on it. But those not the first year, but second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, whatever. I mean, all of those are just, they are iconic.
Yes,
they are episodes that people rip those off all the time. And, you talk about Family Guy being a rip-off of The Simpsons. A lot of Family Guy stuff comes right out of those early seasons of Simpsons. And to be fair, so does a lot of stuff in regular sitcoms, too. And being just that whole idea of a cultural phenomenon, you could not. I would walk out of my high school and walk over to McDonald's for lunch, and there was a house next door to the McDonald's where someone had put a clothesline in their front lawn, and they were selling their own bootleg Jamaican Bart Simpson T-shirts. It was one of those things that it was everywhere, and it all came out of this animated show. It was referenced by presidents. It was referenced by Nobel Peace Prize winners. It was referenced by other animated characters in other shows. It's just one of those things where you can't deny the success of the show, and I think it does deserve to be way up there at the top.
And the one thing about The Simpsons that they have done so well is Simpsonizing celebrities. They've had not just the people that do regular voices on the show, but the people that they bring in, they animate to that person's likeness. Just was so great. But
And they get people to also not be afraid to make fun of themselves.
Yep.
So like Paul McCartney is on the episode of Simpsons, and they actually get Paul McCartney to be on the Simpsons. And what do? Well, he's actually hiding, up on the roof of Apu's Quickie Mart with his little herb garden up there, where everything's organic. But you have to open the case of light beer to get there because nobody drinks light beer. And it's this idea that Sir, quote unquote, Sir Paul McCartney is going to be hiding in this garden above the Quickie Mart, making his organic foods because he's this hippie weirdo. It's like there aren't a lot of shows, maybe nothing since Laugh-In got Nixon to be on the show, where a celebrity was willing to go on there and just make fun of themselves to that degree.
Yeah.
So, Simpsons at number 2. What is at number 1?
1.
Oh yes, and the ultimate number is mine. Go kill Captain Clown, Batman.
So our number 1, the only show that was on every single person's list, it is not even close. It even blew The Simpsons away as far as points go, and that is Batman, the animated series. 4 people had it at number 1. 3 people had it at number 2. IGN had it at number 2. So basically we have just flip-flopped IGN's number 1 and number 2 as far as our list goes. Let's start with one of those people that did have it as their number 1. Steve, are you happy that you got the number 1 right on the dot?
Yes, I'm ecstatic. I believe that is the greatest show in the world. The voice acting in it is superb. I mean, it's got the ultimate Batman, the ultimate Joker. I mean, the ultimate versions of every character. The darkness in it. Of course, the audio, the music that they use. The plot lines. I mean, you have the greatest Batman series of all time right here in this version. Even today, it still stands tall. And it resulted in the creation of the DCAU.
Mike?
Yeah, this... technically, this is what began the journey of DCAU, but really where the continuity type stuff started was... I mean, technically, this series stands on its own. Just like Steve said, Shirley Walker, amazing music. Danny Elfman did the theme for this. Now, a few people that I know, really don't like Tim Burton's Batman film, the 1989 Batman film. Honestly, if that film was never made, we would not have this cartoon.
Why do you say that?
Because this is what was one of those things that inspired Bruce Timm and the rest of those guys to do this cartoon.
Actually, go ahead, sorry.
And, well, first of all, they got Danny Elfman to do the main theme. I mean, it's just a rework around his theme to the 89 Batman film, but it's still, anyone hears that little instance of intro music, you know immediately what show this is.
Oh, I wouldn't, but that's okay.
Well... For those of us that watch superhero cartoons,
is it number 1 of all time though? Because you didn't have it there, so is this the number 1 show of all time?
I would have to say so because of the stories, because of... Again, this is another one of those shows that has groundbreaking feats. They drew this on black paper. That, I don't think, has ever been done in animation to that point. And I'm not sure if it's ever been done since. And they were technically mini movies. I mean, this was a series that didn't need to rely on continuity. This was like, you are watching a mini movie every day or every week, and I don't know. I'm very happy with it coming in at number 1.
You just didn't want to put it number 1 on your list, right? I'm just kidding. Dirt, how do you feel about this being our number 1 overall?
I can see the argument for it. I had it. I had it in my top 20. I didn't have it as number 1. I didn't have it in my top 10 or anything like that. I can see the argument for it. One thing you were talking about, Batman, the Tim Burton movie, and how it led into this. I can remember, I used to work in a comic book store. I do now, but I worked at a different one when I was in high school. And I used to do comic book conventions, and I would go, 2 weekends out of every month I was setting up tables and selling comics at conventions. And I can remember in 91, somewhere in there, somebody had a videotape of this little bootleg animated short of Batman. And it was this kind of 40s noir-looking Gotham City, and these thugs, and Batman appears, and there are blimps in the sky, and we didn't know it at the time. We just thought this was some little, 90-second, 2-minute animated short somebody had made, but it was the intro to the show. Yep. But there were no credits. There was no title card. There was nothing like that. And so we were just kind of excited about the fact that they were, somebody had made this short, and, we didn't know, is this part of a movie or whatever, and there was a lot of excitement for it. And when the show premiered, it lived up to everybody's expectations. I mean, it was very well done. And it was one of those shows, talking about Animaniacs and Tiny Toons and Zany and every moment is packed with 19,000 things going on. This is one of those shows that was not afraid to be quiet. Yeah. You had those well-paced, slow scenes. You had characters, just working and unfolding before you, and it had that theatrical feel to it that you didn't get in a lot of stuff. I didn't have this ranked as high as Looney Tunes or Flintstones or things that I felt were either more iconic to the general pop culture or, kind of revolutionized the whole idea of animation. But I definitely think this was a very well-crafted series. It's very well done. And for being number 1, I'm perfectly okay with that.
Yeah, I mean, I did not have it as high on my list, obviously, either. I had it in the top 30. But I've never heard anyone say a bad word about it, so...
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple episodes here and there that are really, again, looking at it analytically, that are kind of but the overall series was great. Dirt mentioned the fact that it didn't actually have a title card it didn't actually say that, oh, hey, this is Batman the Animated Series, but Bruce Timm said in the very first commentary in the very first DVD disc for the complete series and on Volume 1, he says on the On Leather Wings commentary, they felt that, once you see the figure, this is Batman. You don't need a word saying this is Batman the Animated Series. And it was just an excellent, excellent series.
So that is our number 1 animated series of all time, Batman, the animated series. Shit can now hit the fan.
That's it for the Geek Cast Radio Network's Top 100 Animated Series of All Time list. We would like to thank the entire list of contributors, BehindTheVoiceActors.com, Blogomatic3000.com, ChickenPopPod.com, PopCultureNetwork.com, and ThisWeekinGeek.net. We would also like to give a shout out to the Toon Zone forums and Sketch, who posted the countdown over there. We got 6 pages of feedback. Thanks, Toon Zone. And even though some of you might not...
So far.
Yeah, so far. Even though some of you might disagree with our list, we appreciate the support.
And Tim and a lot of the people over at Geekcast Radio's website.
Yes, a lot of people that commented on the website. A lot of people that commented on the thread over at Pop Culture Network's forums. A lot of really, really good feedback here and there. Actually, huge thanks go out to GCRN's own Kevin Optimus Solo Thompson, because without him, this project wouldn't be what it is, and we thank him for doing all the math, because none of the rest of us were ever going to fucking do that.
And like we said before, maybe we'll improve in the future.
Yes. For those of you wanting to leave a voicemail or audio feedback, please do so by emailing an MP3 file to steve@geekcastradio.com or calling the voicemail line. The deadline is Wednesday, April 13th. The actual list will be posted on the website after the wrap-up episode has been released on April 18th. So there are several ways to get in contact with us to leave feedback for the show. Visit the website, geekcastradio.com, where you can comment on each episode post. Leave the show's feedback in iTunes. Please do this. Follow us on Twitter. The show name there is Geekcast Radio. Mine is TFG and Mike. What's the Pop Culture Network Twitter, Dirt?
I think it's just Pop Culture Network.
It's actually Pop Culture Net, but okay.
Well, I don't run that one, so I don't know. I've got my own personal Twitter.
Do you even use Twitter?
I do. Oh. I don't know who runs our Pop Culture Network one. Okay. I don't know if that's Dan Killen or who. Not my department.
Okay, so what is your Twitter name, Dirt? I didn't know you used Twitter, so.
Yeah, it's PCN_Dirt.
Okay. Kevin, yours?
Optimus Solo.
Steve?
SCP-21.
Become a fan on Facebook. Go to facebook.com/Geekcast Radio Network, and you can search out popculturenetwork.com for them. The voicemail number is 502-526-5821. So again, leave feedback by the 13th? Yeah.
Yes.
By April 13th, in order to get it in on the wrap-up show. We hope you enjoyed this episode of The Countdown and wish you'll join us next time for the wrap-up show. For now, I am TFG1 Mike with...
Dirt.